put sound on. Hey, there we go. This one. Oh. And
no, this one, sorry.
Yep.
And yeah, well,
Sorry.
it's okay. Okay, I'll skip that one. Okay, so I don't know if you've seen all that. That's made by a team of. We got support from Improbable that does a lot of the server technology, but the game itself, everything you see on screen, was from a developer point of view, was developed by five coders. I mean, at the beginning it was even less, it was 3. As you saw, all the islands were player generated. So there's a bunch of quite unique features in the game. One of the first one, and that's really possible because of Improbable, it's a huge world. So our next alpha we're going to run a world that's 25 kilometers by 25 kilometers, with the character being 2 meters tall. It's physical, so the ships that you've seen are being moved by forces in Unity. It's rigid bodies, and they have, gravity and even a physical core that pushes it back up. We don't even deactivate gravity. The world is continuous, so the 25 by 25 kilometers are continuous. So that obviously generates a few problems. That's not the subject of the talk today, but that in itself is an interesting problem, trying to make a world of that size in Unity. As I said, the airships are freeform, and they're created by the players. The ships you've seen are not freeform yet. They're based on a template hull, but in the future version, we have that working now. I'm demonstrating that now. We have a hull that's actually being built by the players, and it's different sizes, and so the ship is entirely freeform. The islands are user generated, and they're going to be part of the main world. The world is persistent. We have weather simulation for the wind and the clouds. We've got simulated critters with ecosystem. They mate, they live, they die. There's a lot of interesting talk to do just about the cricket. And you can see you've seen the grappling hook, which is a physical rope. Basically, when you grapple something, you're applying forces to whatever you're grappling on, and it wraps around the object and stuff like that. So that's quite when we put it like this, that's quite an impressive feature set of Unix stuff for a small team independent. A lot of it is obviously thanks to being able to use Unity and Spatial OS. So the challenge for today, out of all those challenges, the challenge we're going to talk about today, I'm going to try to go into more detail, is in a massively multiplayer physics-based game, when you get a player platform, so a platform, like the ship, being driven by a player, and then you have other player on it, moving freely, and that's all free. And obviously you want that to be responsive, you want that to be consistent, you don't want that to be jerky and all that. So how do you do that? So first thing, why it's hard? Why it's a hard problem? Why it's worth talking about it today? We don't have any control over the player movements. So I don't know, I can't say, oh, you're now in the ship, so now your world is a ship, everything is relative to the ship. And then you get out through a door and then teleport, which some games do, you're either on the ship or not on the ship. Here you've seen the guy, on the deck, they're walking. The hardest bit is the bit where you see the ship flying and a guy walking on the wing. The wing is a crafted item that's been put there by a player on the ship, and then you've got the ship flying at 20 meters per second, and then someone walking on that, and you want to see that in a consistent way. By the way, the video you've seen, it's all captured from network play. There's no local network. We can't run the servers on the local network. We need the cloud to run it. So everything you see is actually captured from network. There's no faking. It's actually video we capture. We've removed the bit that don't look great, but it's all captured from the game. So, so yeah, as I said, the ship can go at quite high speed. This is going to be player customized. They can build more engines, so they can go faster, but roughly the ships you've seen go at 20 meters per second. They also can fly very close to islands. So, you're piloting it, you need to see it properly, so you can pilot next to other ships. So the ships some of those ships are like 10, 20 meters long. We have a ship that we tested and built with that's 70 meters long. So you got different refresh rates. The ship might be updated every quarter of a second, maybe every second, depending. The players might be updated more often. So everything has different refresh rate. Nothing is perfectly synchronized, and so things, get out of sync, at least temporarily, and very jerky very quickly. And finally, different part of the systems, like the clients and the servers and the physics simulation servers, can have authority on different part of the system. Maybe the client is client authoritative, the player is client authoritative, but the ship is server authoritative, and so that can create a lot of problems in synchronization. So our only saving grace here is that the ships are big, they're heavy, they cannot accelerate too far. The only case where they have a very big acceleration is if they hit something that's even bigger than they are, which is usually an island or another ship. So these are quite rare cases, and usually they're quite violent cases. So if things are jerky and not very smooth at that point, it's all right. Most of the rest of the time, it needs to be smooth. So basically, ships are quite predictable in their movement. So there are solutions for that kind of stuff online. A few caveats for what I'm going to present. The game is still under development, so a lot of what I'm going to discuss on games that haven't released yet. But I think we've got to a point where this is comfortable enough that it's worthy, and it's a hard problem enough that it's worth having spreading the information about it. There is something to learn, even if we will need better solutions down the line. And so there's still quite a lot of issue with regard to ship movement in our current implementation, but it's definitely comfortable now. And it comes and goes. It was comfortable, and then things broke, and that's the single thing that breaks the most easily in the game. Okay, so obviously we're talking about player movement on top of a ship, so I want to talk a little bit about our player movement in our game. So very, very quickly, first we tried something that seems like a good idea because it keeps the server authoritative. So I don't know how many of you know the term authoritative in terms of regarding network programming? Oh, okay, I'll have to explain a bit. So when you have a client, Unity client, talking to a server, and you're representing a world, one side, for each object, one side, either the client or the server, need to be what's called authoritative, which is it has the authority over that object. It is the true truth of the game. Yeah. So, for example, if you shoot someone in Counter-Strike, someone has to decide whether you hit or not, and who decides that is the authority. Okay. So, for the player movement, we tried first the server authoritative, which is the server decides where the player actually is. Yeah, that means the client, because it's a bit back in time in terms of movement, because it's waiting for the server to tell it where it is, have to predict. So that's why it's called client-side prediction. Client-side prediction, where the server is authoritative, the player gives instruction to the character, predict where it's going to go, then the server receives those commands and then moves the character on the server, and then tells back to the player, yeah, you can move there or you can't. Now, it sounds like a good idea because it puts everything, all the responsibility on the server, but it's a terrible idea in practice. It's really, really hard to do that. You need to have two systems that talk exactly to each other, a system that's predictive on the client that predicts whatever is going to happen on the server. You get a lot of rubber banding because on the client you look like you passed the corner, but on the server you clip the corner, and so on the client then you teleport it back in time. And so it's really, really hard to do. Also, in our game we've got a lot of different control mechanics. You can be walking, you can be jumping, you can be flying, you can be roping, and every one of those has to have a different prediction set. And it's like you need to write the code twice, one for the actual code and one for prediction on the client. So it's a lot of work. It makes it almost impossible. So pretty quickly, we move to client authority. So basically, the client is authoritative on where the player is. Now that has a lot of drawbacks, but it works and it's comfortable and it's easier to implement. But obviously, there's a lot of cheating issues. You can intercept the position sending from the client to the server. Basically, the client is telling the server where the player is, so it could cheat by teleporting you and by putting you in different positions. Now in this game, it doesn't feel like cheating is a big issue yet, but we will have to protect against that at some point. Also simple issues like if you walk on an island that hasn't been loaded yet, you fall through it, even though it's on the server, and then when it loads, you're in the middle of the island. So that's a problem. So we need to protect against this kind of stuff too. If the client frame rate is the player frame rate is pretty bad, then it will only get refreshed at different intervals on the server, and you might see jumpy. So the quality of the client frame rate is a problem. And also, what happens if client crashes? Player doesn't really exist on the server. If the client crashes, just freezes in space. If you're on a ship, then what happens? Do you follow the ship or you fall? So there's a bunch of edge cases there. Now, as far as movement is concerned, client authority works for us. So what we did for this is, the problem is when you have a player moving on a platform like a ship, and they are refreshed at different frame rate, you could have a lot of what happens is you see a ship somewhere, and the player that are walking on the ship are actually back in time, and they're floating up in the air. When they look like they should be on the wing, they're actually 5 meters behind the wing. We're moving at 20 meters per second. If we refresh every quarter of a second, that's 5 meter difference depending on where the ship is really. And every time one player moves the ship, everybody gets that because they're not simulated at the same speed. And so you get a lot of problem with that. So one other thing we did is we have the player position in absolute world, but also when they're moving on a platform, we register that platform and we make the position relative to that platform. And then we have a value that blends between the two. If you're walking on the ship, you're fully on relative position. When you jump, after a few seconds, you blend off and you start being in the absolute position, which allows you to swing away and blend smoothly between the two. So that works well for us to have a smooth movement on the ship. Now, when you're walking on the ship, all your movement is relative to the ship. So that was the first step of getting the movement working better. Now, the problem is the ship movement is, when you just do the simple implementation, it can be quite erratic. So our first implementation was in a game jam, and we were using Photon, no improbable, and we were just moving the ship in the simplest way you can move the ship. And from that first game jam, it was already, most of the time was spent trying to fix the ship movement and the player movement on the ships, because nothing was moving at the right speed, everything was jerky, it felt really awkward. So we already knew you had a problem, and at that point we just used a simple interpolation from Photon. So basically you get the position update from the network, and you interpolate from the last position to the current position, while on the server the ship's already further ahead. So that can be quite a problem. So then we move to improbable, which provides a lot of other systems and physics and all that kind of stuff. But in terms of how it works, it's pretty similar to, we're basically running in the simplest case, we're running the physics simulation on the server, a headless Unity server, and then we're running the client, we're displaying that on the client, and the player moves on the ship that's on the client. Now, as I said before, when you do simple interpolation, it's always delayed. If you drop a packet, if you don't receive the information about the ship position for a while, for some reason, the ship stops. When you receive the information, it teleports forward, and because all our movement is physical, what makes the player stay on the ship is really friction on the rigid body of the player. Yeah. So there is a capsule, and it has friction to the floor. And so if the ship just teleports forward, friction isn't enough to carry you along, and you just get dropped off the ship. We have to do that because we use that for slopes. Because the whole game is physical, we kind of need to have the player movement being physical and physically represented. So when you have simple interpolation, you get a lot of jump on the ship. The network connection quality is very important and doesn't work very well. So I mean, I wanted to talk a bit more about dead reckoning. I'm not sure I'm going to have a lot of time to cover that. So I'll go through it very, very quickly. I don't know if you know about dead reckoning. Who heard about dead reckoning as a solution to absorb network lag? A few people. Okay, well. So definitely grab the name. I'm going to go through it quickly. It's a solution to help us, and I'm going to cover just that part and jump to the rest. It's basically a solution to predict where the ship is supposed to be now, based on where it was last time you received the information, its speed and maybe its acceleration, and then you predict. You say, if nothing else has affected that object, it would have kept going at that speed and that acceleration, and now it would be here. And you can predict that. It's pretty easy. It's a pretty simple equation to write. Okay? And that tells you, actually, I've been told that the ship is here, but I know that it's further ahead in the future. It's here. Yeah? And also, it allows you to smooth out problem is not receiving the information. You can continue predicting where the ship is going. Yeah? And then when you receive an update, it's usually offset from where you predicted. There's a difference, and then you just compensate for that offset and keep predicting wherever it should be. So for things that are quite predictable, dead reckoning is really, really good. As soon as something is not predictable, like an object hitting another object when you don't have any physical representation on your client, that's harder to predict. So as soon as you have a lot of acceleration changes, it actually is hard to predict. So I'm going to go. That's cool slides, technical slides. I spent a lot of time doing this. I'm going to go run through it. So that was the problem. That's the first one is what you do when you receive the information, just teleport. Then you smooth it over. That's a lot of error, actually even more. Dead reckoning uses the velocity to predict where the ship's going to be. So that kind of does something like that, which you can see can be worse in some cases. Here you got the case where it actually a lot worse, because it only uses the velocity of the speed of the ship to predict. What we had to do, because of those cases, in our case, we had to also predict based on acceleration. So we also send the acceleration, which is a second derivative for math, it's university, you can talk about math. Second derivative, and they give you a way better prediction. This is just a representation, it's not perfectly accurate, and the error is a lot smaller. Okay, so when you're talking about dead reckoning, if you ever implement dead reckoning, you have to think about three things. The actual data you've received, okay, what you've received from the server of where your object is. The predicted dead reckoning position, as I showed here, that's where you predicted, but you can see it's discontinuous, so it jumps. Okay, it jumps here. And then the last one is smoothing over things. And then actually, you can also compensate for lag. You can predict, oh, the lag is half a millisecond. I can teleport forward a bit more. Okay, so what do we got? So what we use for the drift, we do have a second derivative dead reckoning for the position. We use acceleration. We have a first derivative for the rotation, so we only use the speed for rotation. There's no point going to rotation acceleration. And then we blend between just interpolation when things are moving and shaky and colliding with object, and dead reckoning when we're moving and flying at speed. Okay, blah blah blah. Talking about this. Okay, this is just the first step. I don't know if you know, but Unity doesn't always run at the actual frame rate. If you use Unity for simulation and it has too much to simulate, it will start slowing down. Not just the rendering frame rate, but it will actually get to a point where it will not be capable of simulating 1 second of physics in 1 second. And we have that happens on our servers sometimes. When there's a lot of things happening, we don't have full control over it, then we have what we call time dilation, which is the server slowdown. They do that in EVE Online intentionally. It just happened as a consequence of using Unity. So we get what's happening on the server actually, though it believes that the speed is going at 20 meters per second, on the client it's only going at 10 meters per second, for example. And you need to take that into account in dead reckoning. That makes the equation a bit more complicated, especially when you use acceleration. That makes things a bit harder. You can ask me, or we can talk about it, or you can do the exercise if you're interested. Another problem with this is what happens when you're handing over authority from one server. So in our game, we have multiple servers simulating different part of the world, bubbles, if you will, and they overlap. And in this overlap, physical object on one server is authoritative, on the other one is just black on the client. It's being simulated. It's being interpolated. And if you, at some point, when you're moving across boundaries of servers, you have to hand over the responsibility, the authority of the ship to the other server. Is that a sign? So when you do that, you have a big jump. If the server that doesn't get given does get given authority is really offset by a lot, you will have a jump on the server or on the client, and this is that can be enough to teleport the ship out of you and kill the player. So we need to do also dev reckoning on the other servers, which can both go at different speed and both have time dilation. So that makes these things even more complicated. Anyway, so I'm going to skip those ones, I'm going to turn. So one point, I've went through it really quickly. But the thing is, even though that's as simple as problem that's very common in multiplayer games, handling a vehicle that's moving and other player moving on that vehicle is really a hard problem. And when you see the videos of GTA 5 where there's a Zeppelin and then a player walking on top of it and each player shooting at each other and the player on top of the Zeppelin not teleporting every 2 seconds, that's a lot of work that's using some small case in the corner. Now we thought that it's a core element of our game, so we need to be able to do it too. But there's a lot of work that goes into getting this to work. There's a lot of different situations, complex systems, and it's also using multiple timelines. And when you think about that problem, it's really difficult to understand where is the server position, the player position, the other player's position, all of that. It makes the problem difficult to understand and to debug. I'm quite good at this kind of stuff, and it's really hard. My head hurts when I do this usually. But you can go through it. So there's also very little space for fudging in our case. If we have any issues, the ship jerks and everybody gets thrown off the ship, and that's really not very acceptable. Things break, easily and faster and dramatically. So it's very important to have good debug tools for this, and visual debug tools so you understand the different timelines and what happens. And at the beginning we didn't have those, and it makes our life really hard, and we had to debug these things. We had to build the debug tools. That was like it. And when we saw what was going on with the debug tools, suddenly we understood what was going on right away. Before we were just looking at code and data, and it's impossible to understand what's And the final thing is, if you're looking at this kind of problem, the trivial implementation won't get you very far. You really won't be able to do that with simple implementation. Anything in multiplayer is really hard. And something that's trivial on single player, where you have a vehicle and you just put the player on it and it works, and putting that in multiplayer is really difficult. In general, multiplayer makes things a lot harder. Okay, so that is it. So I went through it very quickly. I wanted to spend a bit more time to explain a bit more. Usually I don't do very technical talk. I do fluffy talks about management and how to talk to coders and how to get the best out of your team. I thought you deserved a bit more technical presentation, a bit more value to you directly today. But also we're hiring. I need to plug that. We're looking for a lead Unity developer. If you know anybody that would qualify, someone with experience, a Unity experience, we're looking for someone. And all other jobs. There are other jobs on the website. Join us. That's it. So.
I'm gonna leave time for questions. So.
Good. Any questions? If you have very technical questions, I can take them like this. Yes.
So I missed the beginning talking about this already. Which networking middleware are you using?
We're using, it's not really middleware, but spatial OS from It's a bit more than middleware, yes. They also provide this.
You're not using Unity built in UNet?
No, we use Fulton for our first prototype. We which didn't get us where we needed. We needed a federal authority for the physics. Yeah. Yes.
I saw that you had some physics simulation over there.
Sorry.
I had some simulation over
Yes.
there. How does that work in terms of positioning and stuff? How do you choose? Do you always get the same result, or do you choose one or the other?
One is authoritative, the other isn't. There's handover of authority between different objects, usually based on position. So when you have an overlap based on the position, there's a little chunk of space that is a target size. Over that chunk, one physics server has authority, but those chunks can move around. So it can be that a part of the world that was simulated by one server at one point get given to another one.
You don't have two servers that kind of like do the same thing.
No, we don't blend between the two. Though the core of that is improbable technology, so that can change. But right now, as it stands, it's one of the third, which makes our life easier everywhere.
Alright.
But there is a problem that had a handover on fast-moving objects, like the ship. Normal physics object is okay, but fast-moving. Yeah.
You're talking about having good debugging tools. Are there any that you recommend?
Any that I could?
Any by name that you could recommend?
No, so we had to build our own for all of that. So the question was, sorry, you say you have good debugging tools, you had to build them. Yeah, is there anything we can recommend? No, we had to build our own visualization using the debug thing from the editor, from Unity editor, just representing rays and positions. We had to represent the position of the ship, the updated position, the predicted position, the smooth position, and by offsetting them a bit in different colors, we could see, oh, that's the one that's broken and jumps around and it's not smooth, and it's not initialized properly, and this kind of stuff. But yeah, no, we had to build specific tools for that specific purpose. Anything else?
We have a question from someone on YouTube.
Yes.
So I'm glad this is now working. Sorry to everybody who is listening to nothing.
Yes.
So this is from Mainstreams with a Z at the end. How long did it take you to get to your current solution with all of the iterations you spoke about?
When did we start the project? From that first 3-day game jam to today. So the first time you heard of the project, I've lost track of time. It's a year and a half or something like that, more than that. But we don't have a dedicated engineer on that all the time. It has been different people. Recently, because of that lack of a lead, I've been the one looking at it. That's why I know a lot about it with some other people. But it's a long process, and as I said, it breaks. You change something somewhere else. Improbable change something in how things work, and then suddenly it breaks for some reason. So we've got now to a point where we understand actually what happens, which took a while.
I think that has been on time short we've got today, so we can just stare at this for a bit and see whether it's happy. But I think we'll carry on.
Okay. Any other questions, or we're running out of time for questions? Nothing else? Okay. Well, I'll be around, and you can ask me questions about all of that and more. Cool.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I'm Mark Backler. I've worked in the games industry for about 10 years at companies like Lionhead, EA and Marmalade. I started off working on Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix as a scripter using C++, and then went to work on Fable 2 at Lionhead, where we used Lua. I then moved through a couple of different design positions. Most recently, I was lead designer at Marmalade, and then left to work full-time on this game, Lost Words, which was originally called The Last Word. And this is Audrey Prophet, who's the programmer on the game. She's previously worked at Whispering Gibbon on a bunch of different titles there. And if you know those guys now, they're doing the really awesome 3D printing technology for games, so you can kind of capture images and models from lots of different types of game and really easily 3D print. So I've been coming to LUUG for quite a few years now, and one of the best talks I think I've seen was when Mike Bither was showing Thomas Was Alone kind of before it was released, and you got like a sneaky behind the scenes view, and you got to see how he'd set up his project and everything. Me being quite nosy, I enjoyed seeing that. So we'll have a look in our Unity project file in a bit, and people can yell out if they want us to look at anything in particular. So yeah, we've been working on the title. I started it for the LUUG1 Game Jam about 3 years ago now, and I did it in Game Maker to begin with, and then after the weekend I really liked the concept, and so I wanted to remake it in something that gave us more control and power and flexibility, so we decided to use Unity. Do you want to just run the trailer of the game so people can see what it's all about? If you drag that to the start. Cool. So yeah, it's like a 2D platformer inside a diary, and players are having to collect these scraps of paper in order to transition to the next page, and you're solving puzzles using these word scraps on the page. So the idea at the moment is you're collecting these scraps of paper and they're going together to form the torn pages of a story. We are going to tweak that, but I'll just show you the current version now. It's like the old trailer we have. So when you've collected enough of those scraps of paper, they all come together and you get to transition into this fantasy world that the girl's been writing about. So in this section, you're not walking on the words, but you are using them to interact with the world in different ways, like you can see here. And then you transition back into the diary to solve a bunch of other puzzles to piece together the next page, and the chapters progress on like that. You can also make choices by dragging certain words into place. So here, choosing the name of the protagonist that then gets used in the game. Yeah, and there's lots of different ways that you're using the words to affect your environment. That's probably yeah, so we've now updated the name, and so I also wanted to talk a bit about the funding of the game. So I thought it might be interesting for some people working on their own projects here, because to begin with, like, I ended up quitting my job because we were offered some funding from Kuju startups. So because I had that in place, yeah, it seemed like a good time to go full-time on the game. But then there was a couple of things I wasn't sure about with the funding, and I ended up turning it down to try and work further on the project and get some other funding, which I eventually did. It did take a little while longer than I expected, because I was working on the title for about like 6 months to a year before we had the funding in place. And it's one of those funny things of, like, you kind of have stuff that seems like it's going to go through, but you're never 100% sure. So we ended up speaking to the Wellcome Trust, who do development grants for video game titles. They've been working with Ninja Theory on their title Hellblade. They're also working with a bunch of smaller games companies as well. So yeah, as long as you sort of have a scientific angle that you can work with researchers for, then yeah, they can fund you for different amounts. We then also applied for Creative England, and they've just opened their next round of funding, so that's worth applying for. You can get up to £50,000 kind of as a risk-free loan from those guys. Yeah, just quickly I would say about getting funding. I think there's probably 4 key things that you want to look for. I know some people who've had games funded when they haven't really had anything developed for it at all, and they've just had some really amazing concept art. So that's kind of a big thing for when you're going to publishers and investors and people. You really want to kind of blow their socks off with what the game's going to look like. Then a really solid prototype is really going to help you out, something that people can actually play, whether it's kind of rough around the edges and it just shows the basic mechanics, if it's kind of a game that can shine through the mechanics alone. It also depends who you're talking to, because some people, you probably want a really small section of the game, but just polish it as much as you can and get it looking as good as possible. Because lots of people in the games industry either can or think they can kind of look through a prototype and just see, you know, is it a fun experience, is it doing what you want? But often it's actually a really hard thing to do, and to see where a game is going to end up, because you just don't know what level people are going to be able to get it to. So yeah, like the better you can make your prototype, the more luck you're going to have with getting funding. Then a team, like the more people with experience and kind of who've worked on things relevant to your project, the better really. Is something all investors are going to be interested in. And then finally there's the really great phrase of, if you want funding, ask for advice, and if you want advice, ask for funding, which I think is really true, because a lot of the times we've kind of got funding for stuff, it's been through kind of not the avenues that I would have expected. Another thing from Mike's talk about Thomas Was Alone was when he was saying about getting Danny Wallace involved with the project. Yeah, you never really think to just go and ask someone with a great reputation like that. You don't really know if they're going to be interested in working with you. But when we were first working on the game, I did a game jam, and Rhianna Pratchett was one of the judges there. It was the Space 8 game jam. My friends and I were lucky enough to win the game jam, and I sort of got in contact with her through that, and also Kuju had suggested that we speak to her. If it was just me on my own, I probably wouldn't have ever thought of approaching her, but yeah, because we had these sort of people we're working with who were thinking it was a good idea, we went for it, and she was interested in working on the project with us, so now she's writing the story for the game. So yeah, I think that's one lesson I've learned time and time again while working on this, kind of you don't ask, you don't get, and there's a lot of things, whether it's sort of a discounted rate on an event, or booth space, or tons of different things. You just really have to kind of swallow your pride and ask for stuff, not worry about what's going to happen, just see what you can do. Do you want to open up Unity, and we will just have a look at how the project is set up? If there's anything people want to know about it, please just yell out or ask us out before you forget. So originally I kind of had a whole bunch of different scenes, like each page of the diary was a different scene. I quite like that because I could sort of easily skip between them, but then we figured it might actually be better to have the diary pages in chunks. So now there's kind of the first section of diary pages is all in one scene, and then it's kind of a game object that you use that we enable and disable things on. And then when you go into the story section, that's a different scene. And then when you come back into the diary, the next sort of chunk of levels is another scene. Is it more efficient like that?
I think that I thought when I saw the project that there is no reason to have 10 different scenes that have the same exact background and they work with the exact same way with the animation and everything. So that's why I thought it was better to have in one scene all the parts that are together, for example, the first levels of the diary.
Mm-hmm.
So we can have the background and the animation that's exactly the same all together.
That's cool. And so I've started using a couple of shaders like we're using for the lighting in the story world with kind of the god rays and stuff. We've got a just using the Unity out of the box kind of light shaft shader. We're looking into creating some other ones. There's been a few suggestions from people on different ways that we might be able to use shaders to enhance the look of the game. Not something I know loads about though. Yeah, Alan Zacconi, I don't know if you've seen his shader tutorials, they seem really excellent for sort of beginner to advanced levels. He was suggesting we use a shader for the scraps of paper, because that's one problem we've been having of kind of scaling the different scraps at the moment, which doesn't look great. So we have an option for sort of different lengths of word. We could either use lots of different actual sprites for the scraps and just kind of use them determined on how long the word is, or we can maybe use like 9 slicing technique, so we can scale it and have it looking like really sharp for any resolution, but then perhaps even using some kind of shader might be a better way of doing it. But it's something for us to look into. We're using a few different plugins for the project, so wanted to take a quick look at TextMesh Pro. We were just using the 3D text objects to begin with in Unity. I did try moving over to the Canvas system, but because we want the text to be kind of something that you can walk on and interact with, that didn't seem like the best way to do it. But then the 3D text was not actually all that sharp when we tried getting it in both the diary and the story scene. So we tried playing around with different fonts, and then I think scaling up, is it the text size really high but the font size really small, something like that, and kind of playing around with all the different numbers to get it looking as sharp as possible. But ultimately we found that like we'd heard lots of good stuff about TextMesh Pro, so we thought we would give that a try, which seems to have really helped, and we've got much sharper resolution on the text. And there's also cool things we can do, like having text that's kind of hidden, which isn't working right now, but having stuff that's hidden by darkness, and then you illuminate it when you drag the text over, so we can have all sorts of like interesting messages and instructions written in the background, and sort of things about Easter eggs or secret collectibles and things that you're only going to find when you're dragging the word over the environment. No, this time it's fine. So then one interesting problem we've been facing with this game is localization. I know there's a couple of other games that have had kind of slight similar issues, but because we use text that you're actually walking on, when we localize something, it's probably going to be a different length, which is actually going to change the design of the level and provide us with a few unique problems. Like we've got a example Russian translation here, so we've got one section that's actually longer, and then on the other side it's actually shorter, and also the position of the word, like we can't rely on the movable word like grand here being at that section of the sentence in every language, like in Russian, to move to the end of the sentence. So we've been looking into a bunch of different ways that we can kind of solve this as automatically as possible, but I think ultimately we're going to need human eyes like me or someone else to kind of go through and look at each level, but Audrey has come up with an excellent solution. We've been using the smart localization plugin for that, so that we can kind of generate all the text from a spreadsheet, isn't it?
Yes. And then we try to save for each language the position of the word and the text, the size of the font, so we try to fit as best as we can to the original one.
So hopefully we can then just generate all of the text, and then it will just be a quick pass going through. We've also got it so we've got square brackets on any of the words that we want to be interactive and on the scraps of paper, so we shouldn't have to go through manually setting that. Like if we work with the localizers and they know that how to set extra lines and how to set words to be interactive, then we should be able to get as much done in the first pass as possible, and then it's just kind of a sanity check and moving things around. But yeah, no doubt that will still be pretty tricky to customize everything for each language, and it might just be sort of a case of sitting down with a localizer from each territory to work with them, because we're going to kind of need localizer / game designers in a way. Some people have just said it's going to be a nightmare to do and don't worry about it and just localize later. But I think if you can release in as many territories as possible, certainly like eFigs are the main ones, but then I guess it's just worth looking into the regions that you think your game could potentially be really popular in. And I guess that's one thing about if you do release not doing too many languages first, you can kind of see what regions you're still getting a reasonable number of downloads in, and then you can always localize those versions and roll that out later. So we've been looking at video rendering in Unity as well, because one thing we want to do to get the game looking really unique is we've kind of got a 3D model at the moment of the diary, and we just have a simple animation of the page turn. But I really love games like Lumino City, when they've got kind of the real, use real paper and lighting and everything, because it's really hard to capture that sort of effect otherwise. So we wanted to get a real diary and film it with turning the page without sticking our hands in the way, which is going to be a tricky thing. So it might be a lo-fi solution of kind of using some cotton and having that stretched across, and people far enough away from the camera so we're not getting their shadows in it. But we also want to have a 3D bedroom scene that transitions into the diary. We've got a placeholder thing for it at the moment. So kind of getting these two approaches to work together could be tricky, because I don't really know how we could smoothly go from a kind of virtual 3D bedroom into the footage of a diary on the desk. We might need to sort of use some kind of fade or something there, or perhaps something on the desk with normal maps. We could try and get the video to look like it has some depth to it. And yeah, one thing in developing this project that I've found has been super important is just to be playtesting it the whole time. It was really handy early on when I had the game jam going that I could kind of put in front of people, and half of the things in the game have kind of come from seeing how people react to it and sort of getting inspirations when they're actually playing as well. Also, people often come up with really interesting suggestions when they're actually playing the game and say, hey, wouldn't it be cool if you could do this thing? So then we go in and add that into the game. And yeah, that continuous feedback is just really important. And once you implement something as well, you need to see how people react to it, because quite often it's not the way that you expect they're going to interact with things. Like Bossa have been doing, we've got our own debug stuff for the character. Do you want to run the scene? So yeah, it's just to kind of track what's going on. Cool. Yeah, so we're using Raycast as well at the moment. We played around with a couple of different systems for the collision checking, but Raycast seems to be the best one. We've added in 2 Raycasts at the moment, but I think we're probably going to do a third one down the middle, because we were getting some issues, don't we?
And the platform is too small and don't have the raycast on.
Yeah, so yeah, often you would kind of jump and the game wasn't being forgiving enough. I think people often think that they can jump later than they actually should be able to, but if you're generous, then it actually feels like the game is being fair, even though it's being way too generous. We've also added in a gravity curve for the player. We're still sort of, messing around with the movement of the character, but a friend of mine recommended using a curve like this so that we can sort of modify the gravity, because often if you sort of adjust it so you've got sort of a lot of power to begin with and then it eases off, it can feel a lot nicer, and then you kind of have more pull at the end. But it's something we definitely want to play around with, because that sort of balancing is really important for making just the player movement feel really nice and kind of has a high level of game feel, I guess, as Steve Swink would say. And then, so it's always hard knowing what sort of level everyone is at here. And like when I first started on the project, I'd used Perforce at big studios, but I didn't really know what to use on my own projects. Then through a few game jams, a couple of friends recommended Source Tree as one of the best kind of free source controls around. So I've been using that ever since, and it's not perfect, but I do think it's it seems to do the job pretty well. And I have been looking into Perforce's stuff, because I think for multi-user, as long as you're kind of under like 5 or 10 users, it can be free as well. But I have heard mixed stuff, so I don't know what everyone else's views are on the best source control. But yeah, certainly for a small team, just a couple of us, it seems to have been working pretty well. And then I just wanted to talk quickly about our project management, because that's another thing that I kind of, going into full-time development, I had a bit of experience of how we managed our projects at like Marmalade and some of the other companies. But it's something, there's kind of no real right and wrong way, so it's just figuring out whatever works for you. So far we've been using Trello and just sort of having daily morning catch-ups, and then adding all our like tasks and bugs to that. But we also have a fuller production spreadsheet in Google Docs, and now we're kind of breaking down all of the tasks in that. But it's one thing I've really struggled with, because it can get quite unwieldy if you're kind of listing all of your assets in something, and there's so many different pieces of information that you could put for each item. So trying to figure out all of that has been pretty difficult. So I've just been speaking with lots of different people who have production experience, and a couple of people have recommended Gantt charts and things as well, because I think we've got another year of development on the project, and so you're trying to figure out which things are reliant on which other tasks. And when you're working on a small project, it is kind of tricky, because you don't want to, if you don't have a full-time producer, then you don't want to be spending days and days kind of knee-deep in spreadsheets, sorting everything out. But if you're not tracking things, then it could be quite easy to kind of slip your deadlines and take much longer than you were expecting to create something. Cool. Would anyone like to have a go on a bit of the game and try out a couple of levels? Anyone feeling brave? Okay.
Good.
How are we doing for time? Cool.
Okay, time to show my skills.
Okay. So we've tried to get a bit of placeholder VO in the game. There's some bits that we've changed, so it kind of it doesn't necessarily have. So the tutorial has been quite tricky, because you don't want to beat people over the head with how to do something, and if you show them, then if they were going to figure it out, then it doesn't feel very special. And you're just kind of robbing them of that moment, because when they figure something out, it's rewarding, and that's some of the fun. But then other people get really stuck and they can't figure it out, and you don't want those people to get frustrated. So we kind of try and have a system when it will pop up after a certain amount of time if someone hasn't done something. If you're quick, you can do it before the tutorial even appears. This level is actually pretty tricky, because we've been taking to balance stuff. So I guess maybe this is to do with the extra raycast that we need. That's actually, that should have been jumping, shouldn't it? I think that's.
Well, you changed so many things yesterday.
Right. Okay. I think you'll find that's
totally not
our
me.
problem. Yeah. Technical.
I'm just going to sit here.
Yeah. Thank you very much for volunteering. Valiant effort. Yeah, so we're now working on a vertical slice of the game, which is something, it's really hard to know if it's something we need to do, but we're going to be talking to publishers and people, and you really want the game to look as polished as possible. So I think taking the time to figure out what all the systems are going to be and develop all of those up front is really handy. It does mean that you're sort of taking quite a long while to make not very much content, because you're going to be basically making sort of, I don't know, 70% of the game or something, just to, or 70% of all your systems and things, just to show a very small portion of the game, because our vertical slice is going to be like the first diary level, first story level. But yeah, I think that sort of thing of like figuring out what your final game is going to look like is going to be very valuable for like promoting it as well. And you know, if you want to start making a trailer early or anything, you want to have some really high quality content and stuff for social media as well. Yeah, on top of speaking to publishers and investors and people. But yeah, but some people think a vertical slice kind of doesn't really make too much sense, and you might as well just kind of block out the whole game and know what that's going to be, and then bring the whole thing up to final quality later on. But I think again, it just kind of depends on the different project and what you find works for you. So does anyone have any questions, or is there anything they would like to see? Or you had your hand up there.
Why are you looking for publishing? Is it just for finances and funding to be able to finish the game, or is it because you're looking for something else? Because nowadays you can, a game like this, you can probably self-publish instead.
So yeah, something like further funding could be good. Like if we did need any extra time to polish it up more, or wanted sort of any extra hires or features or anything. But yeah, mostly it's just speaking to platform holders and helping with the promotion. But yeah, it is one thing we're looking at. So self-publishing, we've been speaking to a couple of people who think it's a pretty good way to go these things.
Yeah, you can talk to every platform holder. It's independent nowadays.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess it's more from kind of the promotional angle, and you hope that they bring a lot to it. And I guess that's the other thing of why a big publisher is really good, when they have a reputation and can kind of put you places that you might not be able to reach in terms of marketing. But then also, I guess, you don't know if they have a big roster of other games and you're a smaller title, it's possible that you won't get the same level of support. So. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I don't know if you said, I might have missed it. Where did the first ideas come from for this game?
Right.
The thing is, it's unbelievably original.
Thanks very much.
It stands out, I think. It just seems just
So the original idea that I was doing for the LUUG and Dare game day is LUUG and Dare 28, when the theme was minimalism. I think it was 28. And so I kind of had the idea of doing a game a bit like Tetris was the original thing, but I wanted to have a quote at the top of the screen, and you were dropping the words instead of Tetris blocks, and then you were having to line them up in ascending length across the bottom of the screen, and then you would jump up them with your character to get to a goal at the end of the level. But when I ran the game, I was kind of a bit impatient, and I hadn't actually made very much of the game before I wanted to test it, and so I had my player character in there, and I had a word in there, but I didn't have any physics on the word yet. So when I ran the game, the character dropped down from the top of the screen and landed on the word in the centre of the screen. And I thought, hey, that's actually a lot better than my idea. And so I ended up like scrapping my original one and developing this instead. And then sort of when you were standing on the words, it seemed to make sense that you could drag them around as well. That just seemed like a cool thing to be able to do. And then the words falling away, I think, was actually a bug. I was trying to mess around with the different physics stuff, and I jumped on a word and it fell out the way, and I thought, that's really cool, that was unexpected, and yeah, it was a nice surprise. And then actually quite a lot of things have just been fortunate accidents from bugs. And I think that's the way it often happens in development a lot, and it's why it's good to have your developer as a programmer and developer, or designers who can prototype stuff, because you do get lots of happy accidents like that. We had something recently, we did a mobile build, and kind of a level when the perspective is shifted 90 degrees, and you were moving certain words, but then again another physics thing, so when you were dragging a word, it knocked into other words and moved them around the screen, and that actually felt really cool. It felt like you had more agency, because you're not just interacting with the single point at a time, you're like bashing stuff out the way, and while there's the potential for lots of problems with that sort of system, we're looking into sort of using that as either something for A level or for some of the other levels when there's more interaction with the word that you're dragging and other words, and also the environment. And then I'm a big fan of story games, so I knew that I wanted to have a story in it when I was carrying on developing it, and because it was words, like a diary seemed to make sense, and then young girl character, and then we've sort of been working with Rihanna since then, and we're developing and fleshing out the story at the moment.
So you're using keyboard controls for the character and mouse to move words around, right?
Yeah.
Does that limit you to desktop platforms, or are you looking at mobile and console as well?
We're looking at mobile and console as well. We've figured out a good control scheme for mobile. We have an idea for console, but we just need to get around to testing it out. But it's one of those things, there's so many things we want to do, and so doing the console controllers has been kind of lower on the list, but it's definitely something we're going to be looking at soon. And so for mobile, we want to have what we've already got there, tapping either of the side of the screen to move in that direction, and then if you're holding down either side of the screen to move that way, and then when you want to jump, you tap the opposite side of the screen, and then just dragging the words around with your finger, which actually feels really nice on tablets and mobile. And then for consoles, we're kind of looking at either using one stick for cursor and one stick for movement, or having a button to toggle between them. Yep.
It's a really good game.
Thanks very much.
I just wondered if you could talk a little bit more about how you scaffolding and how much time you spend on that versus like the depth of something.
What do you mean by scaffolding?
Yeah, like implementation-wise, you have to build up. These scenes are very similar in structure, but how much time you spent on that versus like just design level?
Kind of varies really. It depends on the level, and some of them have been just sort of designed by playing around with things in Unity, but quite often, I think a lot of them I designed when I was working full time, and like on the tube I would just have my notebook with me and I would be drawing stuff out in that, and so sometimes you might just have an idea and then you draw it and it looks like it works straight away, and then you put it in game and it does work really well, but quite often you put something in and then it just takes lots of play testing and tweaking it. Kind of, you want to play test it a bunch of times yourself and fine tune it, but then you need to get it out there like pretty soon to play test it on other people to see if it actually works like you think it does. So sorry I can't be more specific, but it just varies quite widely, I guess.
How are you storing your text?
Sorry?
How are you storing your text?
Audrey?
They're all text mesh, and we are storing them using smart localization. So I think they're using XML files, I guess, and they draw them from there.
For source control, have you looked at Unity's dialogues?
No, we haven't. I guess we should. Cool. We will check it out. Yep.
Sorry, just still on the
That's right. Any other? Yep.
So I have two questions. One of them is what's kind of the most technically challenging game like that? And then also with the two control schemes, I don't know if it would be too tacked on, but it would be interesting to try a local multiplayer, one person controlling the character, like this coordination.
Right.
I don't know if that would be too
funny you should say that actually, because when we demoed it at a couple of shows, and I had some people start playing it as a multiplayer game, and I was like, wow, no one's ever done that before, and yeah, it seemed crazy to see, but they were getting on quite well. Yeah, one person dragging the words and one person controlling the character. I guess then you might get the Mario Maker type thing if they're trying to screw each other over as well and move the word out the way at the last minute. So the most technical thing, I guess maybe we can both answer it, but do you have anything?
For me, it's the character controller, I think, to make it look really smooth and, you know, to look good in the game. I have to say the localization, because we talked about the problems that we are going to have with that. So I think that, for me, are the most technical.
Yeah. When I was first working on it, getting the page turning was really tricky. So I worked with a guy, Thomas Norman, who kind of got that working, because I had no idea really how to get the pages turning and sort of loading from scene to scene smoothly, and then also the transitions into the fantasy world. I had some support from thank you. From a few of the guys at the LUUG1 Games Accelerator, which you should all apply for if you haven't done. Yeah, I think that it's running at the moment, and then there'll be another one next year. So check out the website. You get to go to Sweden for 2 months and work on your project, and it's kind of all expenses paid. The only thing you need is to get your flights out there, and then you're working alongside a bunch of other teams. So I'd applied for that with this game, and last year went out, which was really great experience, and yeah, definitely worth doing. Any other questions? Yep.
I was just wondering if you ever had where the characters on one of the words that you drag around the word character.
Yeah, so it used to work like that, and I was wondering if we could keep it like that, but then it kind of breaks so many mechanics, because people can kind of cheat and move themselves across the screen, and it so we figured that it would be better to have when you grab it, the word loses its physics. So we also tried to add the shadows underneath the words to kind of make it a bit clearer, but I think we can do more to accentuate that, and so that you can kind of almost tell that you're probably not going to be able to move the word when you're stood on it. But that is, I think people enjoy kind of experimenting and seeing, now can I move this when I'm stood on it? And then when they fall through it, oh no, okay. But having said that, I think there's definitely room for like a special type of word. I just need to figure out how to represent it, because it needs to look different visually, so you know, okay, there's a different behaviour with this word, and then we need to kind of communicate it to the player that on this type of word or this type of object, you can actually move it when you're stood on it, because I do think that would be fun for certain levels. Yep.
Before adapting it for education.
Yes, a couple of people have said that to me. Kind of want to get it done and launched on all the main platforms, and then I think after that you can kind of look into any potential for educational stuff. People said it might be good for teaching English as a foreign language as well, and other stuff.
So that kids just want to play and learn to read at the same time.
I think there's a few games like kind of Minecraft and Thomas Was Alone and things that have kind of been game first and Portal and then educational things second. I think I'm probably better doing it that way than like the other way around.
Yeah, we've released a few division games in the chat.
Cool, sounds good. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, that's great. Thanks very much.
The to come along, so if we could give them a warm welcome.
As you see, my name is Martin Allpress. We're at London Small Business Centre. This is our main office, but we also have offices in Lewisham and Catford. We have lots of things which are for people to start their business. So this is my marketing bit, so I'm doing it for nothing. So here we're an enterprise agency. We're a member of the National Enterprise Network, which is basically we can help people with starting up businesses, or if you're a new business, maybe go further. I don't know anything about gaming, so I'm sorry about it. My kids do, but I didn't bring them along. We're a not-for-profit organisation, so we charge. Some people very rarely will charge you an individual customer. Your face-to-face business advice and mentoring. Finance, get your finance ready if you're looking for big loans, if you're going for grants, we can help you get those grants on target. Grant application on target, you're going for loan funding, you know, get that on target as well. Presently, you know the banks aren't lending at all, unless you don't really need the money, or if you've got too much money, don't because you want the bank's intervention. If you're starting up, getting the financing really difficult. We do have loans which are for people who don't have assets, who don't have any equity in anything, and we can end up £25,000 for any business that can show viability. And when I say viability, you have to use a business plan and other things to access that funding, but we help you get the business plan right. It's not my money, it's not our money, this is money provided by the government under the Startup Loan Scheme, up to £25,000. We also have other loans which are called creative industry loans, and sometimes we do a £25,000 loan with another loan on top, just to really make yourself work properly. So sometimes good to come and see us. We have R&D loans as well. Now the games that I've been seeing, those 2 games I saw, they might need R&D loans. That might be something we can help in. We'd have to look at it, but certainly be interested in doing it. And we have post-startup loans. These are businesses over 2 years old. We can help them make them as well. We have workshops and training courses, not about gaming, but about helping people understand business and get business working for them. Also, we have lots of office space, co-working space, desk space, office space. You can rent it in the short term, easy in, easy out. So if you want to come along and rent a space for a week, you can have it for a week. If you want to rent it for a year, you can have it for a year. And there's no upfront fees. It's just you pay the rent when it's due. Any questions so far? No, you all understood that. Excellent. This is William IV. This building's named after. We abolished slave trading. Right. So, if you want to set up a company, set up a business, you can set up as you already are, as a sole trader, an individual. You can be a sole trader on your own. You're lonely, you've got nobody with you, you run your own business. Or you can form a partnership with another person, or 3 or 4, or with a company. Or you can be a limited liability company, you can be a limited liability partnership, limited by guarantee. Mostly the first 4 are for business where you keep the profits yourself. The next 5 are when you usually put the money back into what you're doing. So they're currently limited by guarantee means you have people who are the owners of the company, but they don't actually, they guarantee the money. They guarantee the liability of the company. They don't actually, they CIC to help them get involved in coding. What you're doing is you're like a charity, you do it yourself. So you can be a sole trader on your own, running a CIC. Unincorporated association, that's probably the parish council. Okay? Mind the way, can you not see me properly? Okay, fine. So, if you're a sole trader, you can start trading today. If you receive money, you've started to trade. As soon as you start to trade, you should tell the HMRC, which stands for the Magistrates Revenue and Customs. If you don't tell them, they might be a bit upset. And every year, every 12 months of your period of trading, which is usually from April to April, you file a self-assessment return. You file it online with HMRC. Is anyone here self-employed already? Are you a few of you self-employed? No, you are. Okay. A few of you are? Right, okay. So a few of you already filed self-assessment returns. Is there any difficulty doing them? No?
Sometimes figuring out which bids are allowed, which bids they change every year to meet the limits.
Yeah, they do. And the website's not very easy to operate. It's pretty much a decent website. The reason the website's so complicated is they've got to say everything. Because you must have enough of that, and they say, oh, well, yes, it was there in the page, whatever. So they like to tell you everything. It is a complicated website to negotiate around. When I have clients come and see me, we usually talk about the revenue and help them get online, make sure they do it right first time, because if you do it wrong, they tend to fine you. Sometimes let you off first time. When you're a sole trader, you can employ people as well. So people think you're a sole trader, you can't employ people. You can employ people. You have to pay them on a contract. You have to deduct PAY for them, and you have to pay national insurance as an employer, employee national insurance. You can charge VAT if your turnover is over £83,000 a year. But you have to register for VAT actually. If your turnover is below £83,000 a year, you can register for VAT if you want to. Do you understand that? It's all clear? Boring. That's boring, okay. Now when you're a sole trader, You're personally responsible for the debts you incur as a business. So if you do a deal with somebody, you say, buy some goods from somebody, doesn't matter how much, £10,000, you've got to pay £10,000 personally. So you're not protected against liability. Now sometimes it might be two of you want to work together. It might be a partnership. So as a sole trader, it's the same as a sole trader, but you're two people. You both have to file self-assessment returns, and you should drive a partnership agreement. If you don't drive a partnership agreement, you don't know who's going to do what role. And if you're two friends who are working together, you may start arguing and say, well, you should have done that, you should have done that. And the point is, if you have a partnership, you say, well, actually, it's written down, you should do it. And it stops that argument happening. And usually I would say, if you're going to go into partnership, don't go into partnership with your friends or relatives, because you can't control them. And you can't be rude, really. You can't tell what you really think. Roles, who does what, is what I was talking about earlier, and you should have a bank account. Alright? So when you're a sole trader, you don't need to have a bank account. Because it's your money, you can spend it how you want. I would have a bank account separate from my business, because I can identify it for business expenses next to my personal expenses. You don't have to. With a partnership you should do because it saves confusion. A limited company is what most people should be setting up if you want to sort of get your funding, and especially a partnership as well. But when you're a sole trader, you're unlikely to be able to get as much funding as you want to. A limited company sets a good standard because what you're doing is you're filing your details with the company's house, who regulate companies, and then they can see who you are, they can see your address, see your month of birth, the year of birth, and they can see you are who you say you are. That's really important. So it's something that people can look up. And they can see the date you started your business as well, because your business has a start date. And what you're creating an entity, you're creating like a child. So you've got to be responsible for that child, you've got to look after it, you've got to feed it with money, you've got to basically keep it going. If it dies, you're responsible for that as a director. Each year, you file a return with the company's house, and that's a return saying who the directors are that year, who the shareholders were, what the share capital was. The share capital is about money that you've got in terms of shares in the business. And also, in addition to that, you file a set of accounts, which is basically a balance sheet saying what assets and liabilities you have at the end of the financial year. And the financial year is a 12 months after the date you start the business. Or it can be another date you particularly pick. Most businesses that well-established businesses will have a end of year date, which is the end of September, end of October, end of December, end of February. If you end of the month, it nicely fills out a full month. You must have a bank account. And you can't set up a limited company right now. Well, you could do it in the hall here today, and it will take about 20 minutes, and then there's 2 days later they say the company can be legally formed. You've got to give a name for your company as well, it's got to be unique. You can't be McDonald's, because McDonald's will be popping around complaining. Limited liability partnership is the same as a partnership with a limited company, i.e. your amalgamation of the two things. It's not often used now, but the idea of limited liability partnership is that there are 2 types of partners. One's a general partner responsible for all the debts, and one we used to call an equity partner, and these people put in a certain amount of money. And these partners, this is good for gaming because you've got lots of people who want to program a game together. You might get someone puts in lots of money, someone puts in a little bit less, and they get return on what they invest in. And it's quite clearly set out, lots of paperwork involved, quite cumbersome, and if you're not a paid person, then don't do it. Okay. Limited by guarantee. This is pretty tedious, but the point is, limited by guarantee is the same as limited company again, but to form that you don't have any shareholders, the profits are retained and they go back into the company, and the guarantors are the people that run the business who guarantee to pay a certain amount of money if it should fail. And that can be from £1 or up to whatever. And it's usually for not-for-profit charities or CICs. Any questions? All quite clear? Good. Not-for-profit organisations, again, all profits go to the company and should be via either a limited company, company limited by guarantee or limited partnership. Now, CIC, I think I've explained this already, but I'll go over it again. Community interest company. Lots of people set these up when they want to do good work, food kitchens, often set up people like that. They want to help another organisation, and then the money they make goes to charity, but also the people they work with in these CICs often people who want to help generally without getting any fee for it, so they don't get paid, they don't get wages. Lions Charity and Corporate Associations. For associations, you need to work with one other person. You must have a constitution with some sort of agreement, how you can operate. There's lack of control. The only time you need to file a tax return is if you start making a profit, and you should tell HMRC about that. And usually when you're telling HMRC about anything, you tell them online. You file an annual return online, you register online with HMRC. Taxation. Everyone pays tax. You can't get out paying tax, I'm afraid, unless you don't make profits, of course. You pay tax on profits, which is called income tax. National insurance, you pay, if you're self-employed as a sole trader, you pay class 4. That's on profits. But also as a sole trader, you'll pay class 2 national insurance. Some of you are obviously self-employed, sole traders will be paying that on a monthly basis or weekly basis. It's £2.80 presently a week you pay. And you have to be paid. Sometimes you can apply for allowance not to pay it, but should you, when you retire, you've got this much of a pension, so it's quite important you pay it regularly when you can. And everyone has something called a personal allowance. Does everyone know what a personal allowance is?
How much you pay, how much you earn before you pay.
Yeah, exactly. Presently it's £11,000. So if you're a sole trader, you might get
how much?
£11,000.
£7,000.
No, about 15 years ago, it'll be on time. But yeah, it goes up every year, hopefully. And the idea of personal allowance is, as Kurt says, you can earn £11,000 before you pay tax, but you must tell revenue you're earning money, regardless of whether you're earning £5,000 a year or £12,000 over the personal allowance. You must tell them. If you don't tell them, they'll say, well, you know, you've got to tell us. And the fact you might not have to pay tax is not the point. And as I said earlier, if you worry about VAT, you must be VAT registered if your turnover is over £83,000. That's the upper limit. Why would you register for VAT before you turn over £83,000? If you have a lot of capital expenditure, you've got to pay a lot of money which has VAT on it. So, an example, nothing to do with you guys, but if I was going to open a restaurant, I'd incur lots of costs in setting up the restaurant and furnishing it, such like, and so I get the VAT back. Because I pay VAT on the goods I bought to set the restaurant up in the first place, furniture and things of that nature. Taxation of limited companies, they pay tax on profits, as I said before, pay corporation tax. The director should be an employee of the company on pay as you earn, pay as you earn. An employer must pay national insurance as well. So there's 3 amounts of tax that is paid by an employer, director of a company. One is PAYE tax, one is employees' national insurance, one is employers' national insurance. There's quite a lot of tax to pay. Before you start a business, and before you go into the world of running your own business, you should do a business plan. So many people don't plan for their business, and I think by not planning it's a bit dangerous, although some people will tell you they've never done a business plan, which has worked. Great, I mean, it does work, but do the business plan, it tells you whether or not your business is going to be successful, it gives you some idea, it tells you who your customers are going to be, where they are, and why they're going to buy from you. And also you set out, you know, more than money you work in a business, who's going to do what role in that company. It's really important you decide that now before you actually start if it goes wrong. Now if you want to form a company, I was hoping I could do this. This is the website to go to, this is the link, and it costs £12 to form a company, it's quite cheap. And you take it to this page here, which registers a private limited company. Has anyone been on this site at all before? You have? Yeah? Anyone else? It's quite easy to follow. I mean, you must be well ahead of me by now, but you just click on here. I think I'm doing this right. And you get this page up here. No, you don't. Just do it. And this is the box you come to. It costs you £12 to form a limited company. As soon as you form a company, you've got to be responsible for it. You create your first baby. And all you need to know is the name of your business, what you're going to call it. You don't have to call it what you like. Mustn't be rude. Officer details, that's who the director is. You don't have to have a secretary, by the way. Just got one director and you've got one shareholder. The share capital is usually how many shares you're going to have as an individual and how much they're going to be. It's usually £1, you usually have 1. Or you can have 100 if you want. If you have one share, £1, you've got to put £1 into the company. So you don't bank out, pay £1 into the company. Nobody ever does that. A lot of people don't bother. And then you pay on the card £12. That's it, you formed a company. In 2 or 3 days' time, the company's house registrar will get back to you and say, thank you very much, your company's okay to be formed. If you call it by a name which is inappropriate, or somebody else has got their name, they say you can't form it, you can't use that name. So it's a good idea sometimes to check on Company's House's website, which I'll take you to. and hopefully there's a place where you can find company information there. And has anyone got a limited company? What's it called? IT? Yeah, type it in. What's interesting, have you done this before? Yeah? Yeah. No, I know you used computers before, I mean, have you typed with you? Yeah, I hope you used computers. Right, there he is. So if you click on Noti.
It's got my home address and stuff on there.
Oh, forget that. Don't look. Don't look. Right. But also, well, it's your fault because this is what happens. If you click on people, you'll find this is the registered office for wherever it was. Don't see it. And then this date is formed. This is born in February. Happy birthday, February. And you can see you've got a date when the company when he was appointed, what he does, where he lives, what his nationality is. And that's useful if you're trying to find out what people are up to as well. Thank you, James. If you go further, just filing history.
Sorry? Filing history.
That's it. You'll see that, you can see, yeah, you haven't filed any accounts yet, have you? Because it's a new company. If you create another company, just find a name. Put in Martin or something.
Search?
Yeah, just put in search, put Martin. You'll get loads of companies up. Well, that's not me. I'm much older than that. So Martin and Company, I don't know that is funny with me. Oh, you broke me. I thought I'd give it to you because I broke it. So that's it. What I was going to show you is filing history here. This company is a very old company. It's 1, 2, 4, so it's formed about 60 years ago, I think. This file, its accounts, it's got all these accounts. So we did on the accounting company.
Account what?
Second one down on the right hand side. That's it.
This one, yeah?
Yeah. What's good about this? If I can enter this company, I want to see what the balance sheet looks like. And I can look at it online. So this is really important for me because push down a bit further. That's it. This company's turned over £1.7 million. Looks good. It's got a shareholder's money. It's money for the owners of 2 million. It's quick this stuff.
Sorry.
So that's how much money's in the business. £2 million. They've done well. Profit and loss account of £1 million. They've done well last year. So straight away, with 20 seconds, we've looked at our company and found all about it. So it's really important if you're looking for getting recognition of what you're doing, form a limited company and you've got lots of information. All right? Is that interesting because it gives you credibility. It shows what you're up to. Right. Let's go back to what I was doing. I think I've almost finished now, so I'll be pleased to know. We've gone back to the beginning. Have I done this right? You can see I'm not very IT orientated, really. That's it, cheers. Right, so that's that one. So it's £12 each stream. That's it. That's it. Right. Oh no, this is, who's that? Anyone know that? Yeah. It's just the Pokemon Go players, if you want to know. Right, so it's something else I want to talk about, which is quite important, is that there is something called IR35. Have you ever heard of IR35? It's about being honest with your employees, really. I suppose the revenue board in this, something that's always under discussion is that lots of companies will say to somebody, you do your own tax, you can work for me, you do your own tax. So that's happening quite a lot about 10, 15 years ago. Did you experience it? I mean, you did. And the idea is that they said, well, actually, this is wrong. If you come to work for another organisation, you've got to deduct pay, you've got to sit as an employee, you've got to deduct pay, pay away from the salary, you've got the national insurance, you've got to treat as an employee, you've got to give the employees rights. A lot of people are ignoring it, so IR35 came in. So the reason why you should form a limited company or an organisation other than being a sole trader is to put them into an employee of that company. And that protects you against IR35 issues, and it makes sure that you're separating yourself from an employee, but you're also giving an opportunity to be an employee for your company and not taking on responsibility of paying them redundancy money and other issues should personally, so that your company is dealing with that. I don't know if I explained it very well, but it's something you should look up. And if you don't understand what I've said, Google IR35, it will explain it much better than I possibly can. Income tax, All basic income tax on profits is paid at 20%. As it goes over a certain level, and it increases accordingly. But most tax you'll pay if your turnover is below a certain figure will be 20% on profits. Employer national insurance is 12%. Employers' national insurance is a little bit more, it's about 13%. There are 3 rates of VAT at presently around. 20% of what we usually pay on most things. 5% of what we pay on fuel bills, gas and electricity, we pay on that's 5%. And 0 rate or exempt is on children's clothes, motorcycle helmets, things which they want to be encouraged to buy and don't want to penalise with VAT. And as we said earlier, the personal allowance for if you're a self-employed person or if you're an employee is £11,000. So when you get a pay slip, it says non-taxable income, that's part of your personal allowance. So 1/12 of your personal allowance you're paid monthly. I've got these notes, I'm going to email, anyone who wants these notes, they can just send me an email, I'll send them back to you so you can just get these links. The first one's linked about our organisation, London Small Business Centre. The next one's a link about the self-assessment, it has to file for self-assessment if you're self-employed. The next one is to file, to register with the Inland Revenue about paying your taxes. Right. And that's me again. And that's the end. So thank you very much for listening. So now's the rush through that, because I know you want to get to the pub at 6 o'clock. Is there any questions you want to ask me at all? Yeah.
Do you have any examples of LLPs that have been used for game development?
Pardon?
Do you know any examples where LLPs is used for game development?
No, I don't know of any LLPs where I thought I know very people who formed LLPs, to be honest, because it's a bit of an ancient sort of, well, it's not ancient, it's a bit of an unnecessary sort of format, really. It's usually done when you've got maybe a limited company or an organisation that's not an individual, wants to trade with an individual, say, sort of create an entity that way.
Can one person start a limited?
Yes, they can. Yeah, you can start a limited company today.
Is the 3 roles of director?
Yeah, the role of director is the role you have to be responsible. You're responsible as director of the company. The shareholder is an investor, which is you as well. You don't have to be a secretary, but sometimes you have a director and secretary at the same time. But you don't need a secretary. Just what you need a director and a shareholder. And also, your home address is you need a registered office. Now, it can be your home address. Some people have an issue about that because you're renting a place. The landlord might say you can't run a business from home. Well, yes and no, it all depends what your lease says, but most times the reason why a landlord says you can't run a business from home is they want to run a nightclub from home. He doesn't really care, really, or she doesn't really care, if you're running a business which is basically programming, because you're not going to be disturbing anybody. Okay. Anything else?
Forgive me if I'll say this loudly so everyone can hear it, although it's more just for me. So, LUUG as it is a community thing. We have almost no finances.
Right.
We did get sponsorship from Perforce,
yes.
They're giving us about £1,000 for drinks, and we've just had an arrangement so far where they've paid the bar bill, or I've paid for it on my card, and they put the money back to me on my account.
Yes.
We do have a payment of about £60 once every 6 months to pay for the meetup group, so we can kind of have all of that organisation happen. Now, those 2 things are kind of minor inconveniences, but is there any advantages of LUUG becoming a CIC?
Well, only if you want to, no, not really. As you apply for grants, it might want to help you because it gives you recognition because you're CIC regulator. There's a CIC regulator, which is a government agency. You register a non-profit business, and you have a status of limited by guarantee. So there might be, but it all depends what sort of income you're going to get. If you're just getting, all of your paying in contribution each week, it's a bit like I'm a member of Golf Society, we're not a limited, we're just an organisation who just agrees to do things and play golf. It's what you want to do with your organisation. If you're applying for outside funding, then they want to see what you're about and they will look at your accounts. So when we look at those accounts in a company, if I was going to fund you, I'd say, well, that's worth funding. They can repay the loan. That's what I'm looking at.
A flip side to that question then for so if someone's working by themselves, they've created a game, they put it on the App Store, they're getting revenue and it does well.
Yeah.
If they don't register themselves as a company, what are the downfalls?
Well, they're a sole trader. And if they don't register within a month of receiving their first payment, then they're breaching Inland Revenue regulations and they're pretty much fine now. But if they did find out, if your neighbour grassed you up or something like that, or you upset your mum and she told them, then the thing is that they will say, well, you haven't declared your income tax, and they will fine you the amount of tax you should have paid plus the tax again. So you've got to be quite astute, and you should be earning money on income without declaring it. It's quite important.
So can I just ask then, as a sole trader, I work as a freelance programmer, and I've done, I manage all my tax and just do like that. If by God's grace some of my games start make some revenue, is that just, I can just add that to my income? It's just
you add to income when you do your return.
You don't have to register
no, because you're already filing self-assessment return. You've done it for 12 years, I think you said.
And can I do that sole trading of my games under my sole trading name?
Yeah. I mean, I've got clients who are sole traders. They've got several different businesses going on. So I've got a guy who runs a hairdressing place. He also delves in property. Well, property actually not really answers on the different tax regulations, but he does other things. And he's always making a bit of money somewhere along the line. So it all goes into one big bundle, and he just pays the tax on the net profit. And when you file a self-assessment return, it's quite easy because you file the amount you've received, what it's cost you to receive that money, and what the net profit is. That's the only three figures they need. They don't want a lot. You don't file your paperwork with everybody. You just file the figure work. It's done on trust. Revenue still trusts us to pay our taxes correctly. Yes, sorry.
You said it's about £12 to set up a company. Any kind of ongoing costs or things?
Yes, there are. Good question. Thank you. I'll pay you later that one. Yes, it's £13 a year you pay to file your annual return. And you've got to file your annual return within a month of your company being formed a year on. So it's 13 months you get to file your return from the date you first formed the company. And you can't file any lower than 12 months, so it's a 12 months window frame. And those file your accounts is free, but you get 8 months after the first anniversary. So you get nearly 20 months, so you've got to file 20 months after you first was incorporated. There's no fees like that. No, don't waste your money. Because if you're clever enough, you can do an Excel spreadsheet, puts all your income down in pounds or pence or dollars or whatever it is, and all your expenses. Because the revenue don't want to really see your accounts. They don't want people looking at your accounts. They want to see what you're earning, what you're paying out, what difference is. That's the tax.
Do you want to get them to do
Huh?
Do you need to get them?
Good God, no. You can do if you want to, you can do. But it's your business. If you want to steal from your business, it's up to you, isn't it? It's not down to, in other words, they're not going to mind if you steal from your business, it's your business. The revenue might mind, but what you're doing, you're not declaring the tax correctly. But truthfully, they don't go and visit everybody every day. If you think about it, there's something like 20 million people who are self-employed in this country right now. And it is a lot, but that's happening also. 20 people who are earning their own income. And you think, they can't check everybody. So the truth is, you should be doing it. Maybe they will never get found out if you are doing it, but the truth is, you don't need to audit your company, you don't need an accountant. Everything you can do online. And there are guidance steps. But when you file a company return, if you form a limited company, you file an annual return with a private capital company, it is a nightmare sometimes the first time because you file something called a CT600, I'll tell you the number, it's what it's called, and it keeps beeping at you every time you do a wrong figure. And it doesn't explain why it's wrong, which is really even more annoying. So I usually sit down with my clients and I go through it with them quietly in a painted cell with lots of handkerchiefs and we work through that together. But it can be quite an emotional moment. Yes?
If you're
So I'll do with you later. Sorry. You're both in line.
Sure.
So if I move over here, you're not. So that's okay, go. Go on, you go.
If you're already an employer somewhere and you become a sole trader on the side, does that complicate things?
If you're employed and you're a sole trader, no it doesn't, but you've got to file a return. Some employers, so if you're a programmer for your employer and you're programming at home, it might be upset because you're competing against them. That might be an issue. But as such, it's not an issue if you're running your own business and providing you're filing a return. It's about you being honest and paying your taxes and filing your return. So there's no issue for me if you've got the time to do it. When I get home, I want to watch the telly. Or some of you want a game, I suppose, but I want to watch the telly. Yes, sir, you.
Yeah, sorry, it was just an accounting thing. So I'm a freelance programmer with my own limited company, and I do have an accountant.
Good.
I find it takes away to do my own taxes. It takes away from doing what I do.
There's nothing wrong with having an accountant, but you don't have to have one.
No,
you see,
yeah.
but what you're doing, you're outsourcing your work to somebody else because you want to do something better. Yeah. That's fine. I mean, the company we looked at, that had a £2 million turnover, they must outsource to an accountant. They don't want to do an accountant, they look really good. But as such, you don't have to have one. If you've got the ability to do it, and you're programmers, you can probably write your own programs to your own accounts. So it's not particularly difficult to find your own accounts. Well, you know,
It's nice not to have to think about it.
well, I don't think about it, I just make it up. If I'm not sure what you think it's the job. But the truth is that there's three figures you've got to think about. Turnover, what is the total amount of money you receive in, your cost of running your business, which is your cost, and then you've got your net profit. Those are the two things you've got to think about. That's what you've got right. The chap right at the back in the green shirt.
I kind of would beg to differ
What?
on the accountancy, but I think that's probably through my own slightly sticky experiences within that revenue and actually having an accountant sort things out. Because I was too busy and I should have outsourced it in the first place.
Yeah, but probably, yeah.
But there is a halfway house that I thought was worth mentioning, rather than having to, yes, a lot of people need to build their own spreadsheets. Actually, there's some really wonderful recordable services online that I've been using just because I don't really want to have to be as organised as I need to be. And one of them was free agent, basically freelancers. It's kind of, you could definitely get away with using free agent and not having an accountant without having to build any of that software yourself.
You're absolutely right, I agree with you. There are some great ones online, and I think you should all look at what the options are. I think by just keeping your head down, not looking at it is good. It's all about controlling. If you're running a business, it's about controlling what you're going to do, and it's like, I'm going to do that, I don't want to do that. So see, some people don't like doing marketing, or some people like doing sales, they let's do that for them. The same with accounting. You don't have to outsource it. You can if you want to. If your lifestyle is such that you need to outsource it because you're everywhere about, that's fine. But what's going to happen? Your accountant is always going to ask you, where's the information? So you've still got to get the information over to them. And by the time you've done that, they're going to charge you for looking at it and going through it, whereas you could give them the information up in a nice way sometimes.
It's definitely not hiring an accountant is definitely not like a hands-off affair.
No,
You
exactly,
end up spending a lot of time actually giving them the information you could just work.
You're right, yes, absolutely.
But especially when I was dealing with having business partners and other things that kind of can easily make accounts slightly trickier, it does definitely have to happen. And then they kind of act more like a business advisor or a financial advisor anyway.
That's good, and you're right, and I think the other thing I would say is if you're going to use an account, make sure you set out what you want them to do for you in an email or letter, make sure you've got some evidence is really important, that said, this is what I want you to do for me as an accountant. A lot of accountants are reactive rather than proactive. You understand the wording, but the often hear accountant, you should have done that last year. You know, why don't you tell me now? Why are you telling me that now? I wanted to know that 12 months ago. And it's about those decisions which you weren't being helped with. And I know I'm singing my own song here, but that's what we do. We actually help people at the time they need that help. So that's what we do. Anyway, yes sir.
If I'm self-employed and paying taxes already in a foreign country, can I still set up a limited company?
It depends what foreign country you're from and how you set that up. So if you're in an EU country, it's different. If you're in Switzerland's the same. If you're in like South Africa, which is a bit difficult. So it depends which country you are in.
It's EU.
Pardon?
European country.
Right, so it's an EU country.
Yeah.
So most EU countries recognise income in this country as being, you have two different tax offices. So your home tax office where you're paying your taxes to, and this tax office. Where's your money going? Where are you earning money? Where are you sending it?
I mean, I live here. So
Yeah. So you're paying tax abroad, are you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I've got a VAT business number in my.
So where's your money going? Where's your business dormant? Where's your business living?
Well, I'm here, so I work here.
So your registered office is here. So your income's coming in here.
Sorry?
I tell you what, this is one we should do another time. Because it sounds though because if I was living in this country, I was only made in this country, I'd be paying tax in this country because the tax rates are lower in this country than most of Europe. But it's up to you. It's your money. Anyone else? Yes, sir. I see you had your hand up, look at me.
No, nothing.
No. Okay, thank you. Any more? Right, thanks very much. Cheers.
We're just going to start now. So this is Julian, and as some of you are able to see in the break, they have a prototype locomotion device for VR. How many people got to have a go on it during the break? Okay, we're going to have another break afterwards. So straight after the talk, if anyone wants to have a go, then Julian will be on the side. But if we could give Julian a warm welcome.
Oh, you want the video first? Yes. Okay, sorry. Oops. That one.
Great. I just want to start with a video just so you get an idea what this is about.
Cool. Oh, wrapped up.
Okay.
I'm walking across some.
The Army's latest weapon in recruiting new officers. A virtual reality reconstruction of the assault course at Sandhurst.
Okay, so it gives you something of a flavour of sort of brief, just brutally edited other people's videos just to make up a little showreel for us. But you can see there's all kind of videos apart from us at the couple at the end. Right, so locomotion in VR. First of all, we'll have to explain, I think, why you want it. I understand that this the device over there is the prototype of our device that we've been selling for a few years to mainly B2B customers, but in fact entirely, to, as you saw, companies like Nissan, Wells Fargo, British Army, architecture firms, and in the last couple of weeks Samsung have actually bought 3. They're sending them around the country with 3 teams to 28 cities, doing a sort of something to do with the Olympics, basically. I think it's a running game they've created for it. So I'll mention that at the end, so I won't carry on. Anyway, so why you need the locomotion platform is you want to be able to move. If you think about the sort of games that are very successful out there, or the first-person shooters, things like that, a lot of them require locomotion. And I think that's what a lot of people were thinking of when they wanted VR. They wanted the ability to feel that they were somewhere doing something, which often means exploring. So what we found after a lot of research is you only need sufficient motion. What we find is that so long as you can stand and you turn and that you move your legs to get over there, after a while your brain's satisfied with that. But it comes out of that the most important fact about walking, I would suggest, is that you don't think about doing it. You won't have any memory of having walked here today. And so there's only so much effort you should go into replicating that. You need sufficient. I will acknowledge the fact as you walk on this thing, it feels a bit like skating, sure, but it's closer, we found, to any other sort of mechanism for doing this. And when you think about that, after you've been doing it for about an hour, you'll forget about that. You want to concentrate on the game you're playing, not how you're doing it. Then your memory is, you just remember where you went and why you went there and what you did when you got there. So, yes. Right, there's another reason. So, as well as getting a far better, greater sense of immersion or sense of presence, as academics call it, there's the elephant in the room, which is the sim sickness, which happens very easily to about 2/3 of people who try VR. And the one that we're attacking here is what we call visual vestibular mismatch. where if I turn 180, my inner ear will have told my body that's happened, and that's what's matched my vision. Now, if you try and do one without the other, you can, has been proven by using a gamepad with a 2D display, you can switch off one. As long as there's no input, you can go, right, okay, that's not happening, I can still play. Where it goes horribly wrong is when you try and mix and match between the two. For instance, I could be turning my head in a head-mounted display, HMD is called them, like the Rift, and turning my thumb to the left, and so my real position is somewhere in between. The difficulty with that is that your brain works very much on anticipation of what's about to happen, and it cannot anticipate when the goalposts keep changing all the time like that. And this is why most people just feel incredibly sick if they try that at all. So what you'll find is that a lot of people who wear HMDs, you'll watch videos of them, and they'll eventually just keep their head still, and they'll just be using the controller. And that's to stop them feeling sick. Now, if you think about it, why not just buy a big monitor if that's what you're going to do? And what my feeling is that, you know, if you're only using an HMD as a 360 monitor, then you're not getting the best out of VR. So this, of course, gets around that. If you want to turn 180, you have to turn 180. That keeps it all matched. And so a lot of people get off that and say, that's the first time I've ever tried an HMD and not felt sick. I wouldn't say it's the case for everybody, and when we've been doing this demo, for instance, some people still feel a bit dizzy, and that's probably because there's no positional tracking. There's 6 degrees of freedom on the tracking. Something like this has 3. So it has your pitch and roll. As well as that, you want movement in each of these planes, and they call that 6th off. So with that, and that's what, say, something like the Vive does, or the Rift, you get positional tracking, and that pretty well solves motion sickness for most people, except for this problem here, which is why you should never really use a gamepad with VR. And yes, I think I mentioned that there's a lot of other reasons you could get sim sickness, which are to do with latency, persistence, and all those sort of technical features to do with the display itself. But assuming you've got a good display and these getting great very, very quickly, that won't be a problem. So yeah, I don't want to hang on too much, but that's one of the main features of the platform. So I'll say there's 4 main inventions here. One came up with the idea about 15 years ago, believe it or not. I started a limited company in 2009 in order to, because I was trying to get prototypes made, and the companies wouldn't listen to you unless you were limited companies. I had to start the company just to be able to do R&D. And at that time, I was still not actually paid by the company, so I know you said you should be in KOE, but I'm not entirely sure, but anyway, it's minor point. So, where we're going? Yeah, so what I wanted was this dish. The trouble of building something like this is you have to make it full size and stand on it yourself before you've got any idea whether it's working. Nothing. You cannot measure or rather calculate what coefficient of friction is going to be. It can only be done empirically. And it can't be done at small scale and it's scaled up that much. So you basically try things until you think you've got something right, build the whole thing full scale, stand on it, and immediately you find that didn't work. Back to the drawing board, that sort of thing. Anyway, so first part, which we patented in the States, was the low friction dish idea. The footwear, if you've seen anybody else using it, they're infringing, at least in the States. Right. What the other thing I wanted to do was I spent over 30 years at BBC, and basically, if you work in the studio environment, anything like that, there's no such thing as drop-offs. You can't have, you know, a picture going black for 7 seconds or something like that. You'd be amazed at how upset TV people get or producers get when the programming falls off air. So you learn to create systems which are 100% reliable. Either have duplication or you just make them so they're not too complicated in the first place. And so my background is very much about building something that is simple to use and stays working. And the reason for that in virtual reality is because if you've got everything set up, you've got a headset, you've got trackers and everything, and then just one foot isn't properly tracking, that's the most frustrating thing ever, because it means you've got to take the whole lot off, go and fix it. So, and I believe that's why we're going towards mobile VR, because that will be the closest we got to an appliance. The current systems are fantastic for R&D and for pushing the envelope. But I think for the average person who just wants to press go and get on it and use it and get off again, mobile VR is going to be the way to go for, and I see that for many reasons. Anyway. So, we have this frame at the moment, which is, as I mentioned, strong collapsible. It'll actually take about 6 tons of downforce, we believe. But we're not sticking with that. We're probably going to move on to the Rover 2, which I'll show you in a moment. Right, I talked about reliability. That's how we do tracking. It's a piezo sensor on the base, and basically it's a contact microphone. So it doesn't pick up any noise except that from the base. So you can jump up and down next to it on the floor, it's not going to pick that up. And what they do is, as you move, the faster you go, the louder that noise amplitude, the envelope. And so we'll take that value and apply it to the joystick emulation. So basically, the faster you go, the harder you're pushing the joystick forward. And that appears to be pretty well 100% reliable. I mean, obviously, some things can break, but all I'm saying is, we haven't got tenuous things like trackers that might fall off your feet or not be charged properly, or line of sight issues that we get used to get with Connect, those sorts of things. I just wanted something as the equivalent, if you like, of the bimetallic strip in your toaster. It just works, and it has done for decades. So that's the first part of the innovation. So yeah, to go through the other things I wanted, by emulating a joystick, for instance, I can avoid any need for SDK. I don't know if you've ever bought a computer peripheral and then found that there's a change in Windows, something like that, your peripheral no longer works. It's really frustrating. And also, if you're expecting all the game developers to take up your peripheral and code for it, well, they've got to expect you to be selling millions and millions and millions of these things, otherwise it's just not worth their effort. So why even go there? Just want to keep away from it, keep yourself insulated, if you like, so it should just work, so long as it's with something that's an open source system like Android. The other thing, of course, is because it's at audio frequency and it's sounds about 2,000 times a second, which is massively helpful. There's no perceptible latency. A test we did once before the BBC, we couldn't tell anything under a tenth of a second, so 100 milliseconds you've got to play with. And actually for walking, you've probably got a lot longer, because if I start walking towards that door, if the action happens half a second later, it's actually quite hard to tell. Much harder and much easier to tell latency when I'm turning my head. I think as Michael Abraham has pointed out, your eyeball can turn at 900 degrees per second, so that causes real issues there. So latency really is more of a problem with this, so long as you don't get a couple of seconds or so. What I'm saying is, if I'm walking towards the horizon, I can't see how quickly I'm getting there. If there's an object right in front of me, if I start moving, then it's going to be an issue. Either way, this is no perceptible latency. Fully proportional seed, and versatile. We expect it not to be able to just do things like walking, but also skateboarding actions, other forms of human locomotion, which are quite fun to try once in a while. Other schemes that we tried. You can understand that this isn't necessarily what the rest of the VR industry wants, because they just want something which is cheap and free. Well, free. As in, if you do a simple piece of software, I'll come to some that do it. That, to them, would be a preferable solution. The only trouble is they all diminish or break presence, and if you do that, then you kind of, you're not going to be getting the VR experience. Well, I mentioned about 360 monitors before. What I found with some games, especially when you end up holding your head still and just using joystick, is that when you think back on it, you can't distinguish that memory from having played the game in 2D. Now that's a sure sign of failure in VR. You need it so that it could only have, you want to feel like you were there. Obviously, it's graphics, but you want to feel that you're actually fully immersed in it. So the experience, you may have seen this if you've used the Vive. They use this teleportation or blink idea where you hold the controller almost like it's squirting like a hose, and where it lands you get a little circle, and when you let go you suddenly appear at that spot. So to get across there, I just press the button and suddenly appear there. The trouble is that I've now come and ruined the sense of presence I had. To go through a few of the press comments about games like Fallout 4 that tried it, say, at E3 last year. Basically, they're all let down on the idea. The general consensus was the Fallout 4 hadn't worked, and yet it should be an ideal game for VR. It's got locomotion, it's exploration. So we feel that this is the way they should be thinking anyway. There have been some other devices out there, but they often tend to get very big, very heavy, and you can tend to get very hot in them. And yeah, we've had quite a few, as I say, paper shotgun. If you try the Lab, which is a fantastic set of mini games on the Vive, wonderful fun, but you do come out of it feeling I had no idea where I was or where I moved to. Hand walking, I call this. I liked it actually. It's a nice idea, and this is a free Unity plugin. And I think it's probably worth giving a go. The idea is if you're using Vive, that you would hold the handles, pull both triggers, and if you walk like, move your hands like that, you'll go, and it takes the direction from the direction of this, not by my head, so I can free look as I'm walking. That, I like the idea. I think though in practice that's going to be quite difficult to use for a user point of view, because the same device you're trying to interface with or fight with or whatever is also the thing that's sending you forward. So you have to mentally switch from one to the other. Or I might reach for something and find up turn left, or you can understand how, and any time you enter, you give sort of mental load to your user, you're damaging that sense of presence, which is what virtual reality is all about. So that's my one comment, but you could, if you wanted to try it, it did look pretty good. It comes from a guy from MIT, I believe. So a lot of people say, oh, well, what you should have is a harness to keep you upright. And there's a whole bunch of issues to do with doing that. One, medics, consultant physiotherapists really don't like the idea, because they say that's like giving an able-bodied man a walking stick. It's going to distort the way he uses his body, not improve upon it. This, on the other hand, seems to promote good balance, posture, core stability. The other things I found by having tried some of these devices with the harness is that you get hot before you've even moved, and after you've been going for a couple of minutes, you are dripping in sweat. So that's one thing, and it's a bit, you have to put your weight onto your stomach, and then you're pushing, you feel like you're pulling a heavy cart behind you. It's, so a lot of these things, like I said, probably look like they're a fantastic solution, but I would try them before you commit too much to them. The other things we found, and this is why we think a lot of our B2B clients are using this, is because any member of the public can come up and use it pretty well straight away. To begin with, you're not going to be able to walk with your hands free as the guy in the video was doing it, but you can at least use it, and it doesn't matter what you're wearing. So if you're wearing, a dish dash or a skirt or anything like that, it really doesn't matter, and that's quite important if you're going to be dealing with the public at all with it. Right, so we did do proper clinical tests. I just mentioned what the results of those were. In fact, we went to you're on the video here, I'm not allowed to tell you which hospital it is. But anyway, it's a top teaching hospital in London. I haven't read, you have to pay academics to be able to use the name of their college, so I can't tell you which one, but it is the best place here. And we went to them we wanted to make sure that it was going to be safe, because we don't want to unleash this on people and find out, it's going to hurt them. And they came back and said not only that, but they felt it could be used for rehabilitation, for walking, and various others, basically for that. So, this is the one you see here, is the first version of it, and we are still selling this on the website, but we want to be moving to the next version in a moment. One of the things I can point out, weight. Do think about the weight these things are going to be, because you're going to be paying for the shipping. And if you ship by ship, that's actually an incredibly complicated business. It takes months. You can have water damage. You have to fill a whole container, or there's loads of legislation, loads of paperwork to do with it. The easiest and most practical way is to air freight. So air freight is all about the volume and the weight. So by having a box as small as that and as light as that, it means we can get the shipping to something half sensible. Just pop the figures into DHL, you'd be amazed how much it can cost to ship things places. This is a professional frame that we've had made up before for people like Nissan, British Army, so that's when they, and the nice thing about that, you can put advertising on the outside, on polycarbonate sheets on the outside. This is where we want to get to. Had industrial designers working on this. You can see there's a higher look on it so that your feet don't come out to the side. Simple mechanism. Hopefully make it elegant enough so people won't mind it in their actual home. And keeping the same, and the other sort of benefits we have are things like keeping it wireless, battery powered. So because we found that people were often tripping over cables and damaging the unit, so we wanted to get rid of that. You might see the huge shoes I've got there. Another thing people will be asking for is, can I put my foot inside? You know, do I have to take my shoes off, especially in public arenas? And so we've got around that problem. Right. Yes, this one thing that we found quite interesting. We didn't think the Army's idea was going to work. They wanted to film a 360 video running through the assault course at Sandhurst, which they did. And then you put the headset on and you run through the video. Thinking, well, you're going to go that way, aren't you? But no, you don't. You tend to, your brain, you tend to want to believe and comply with an experience. So if the whole battalion is running this way, you don't run that way. You just follow this way. And if you do that, the experience is really, really good, surprisingly good. And I thought, well, you could apply that to other things like guided tours. And you know, if you go and see a house, then the estate agent might show you around. So you could actually use that. It was just, you know, an observation. I just wanted to explain that don't always go for the obvious answer. Try things out in VR because you'll be surprised what works. So we've got, the good thing is a lot of these B2B customers are coming back a year later and creating new experiences. So Wells Fargo, which you may have seen in the video, at the beginning had about 9,000 people try that, and they're now doing a more expansive experience. If you think about it, you can use VR to sell to, you know, banks are pretty hard sell to most customers. So, you know, VR provides that opportunity. And last week, as a result, being that I developed Brighton, where every member of the Unity team came along and had a go on it, we've now sent one to their San Francisco office where they do the input, and to their Seattle office where they do VR. So looking forward to see what they do with them. And we also sent one last week to the National Museum of Computing at Bletchley Park. So yeah. Now this game, if you haven't had a try, is worth having a go on. I wanted to make a sort of appeal to Unity programmers about the kinds of games that you create in VR. It'd be, ideally, I think, what you don't want is a game which you might as well play in 2D. And the great thing about VR, especially if you add physicality, which I think VR is all about, is adding what they call proprioception, which is the knowledge of where your limbs are, how much you're exerting them, is that massively reinforces the illusion, which is why I think you need to be stood and moving if you want to get the best out of VR. Personally, I've never seen an example. They've been using caves in universities for VR for 30 years. I've never seen someone sit down in one. So, but also, if you're in a game like this and you are physically running to try and get away from something, just the fact that you're running to get away from something totally makes your brain believes it, whereas you'll never get that illusion on a 2D game. So those are, you know, that's just, and Tom, who did this, I did a lecture for LUUG on VR 3 years ago. I think it's the first one they had on VR. And straight away afterwards, Tom Davis got up to show his web-based Unity game called FPS Man, which he updated for me to put, so we could put first of all on the DK1, then DK2, and it's now running, as you can hear, on Gear VR, and I think he's about to put it on their store if they'll accept it. Right, so just in summary, player comfort mandatory. Certainly don't make them sick and don't make them sore, as you can get with harnesses. As I just mentioned, standing helps. I think I've covered all these. So all I want to say was the variety. That's what's going to make the take-up of VR, apart from anything else, is the fact that you don't want just a few types of games. It would be like buying a TV that you can watch the news on for some spurious reason. And the thing to look forward to, if you haven't come across it yet, is Google Daydream, which should be released this autumn. And to my mind, that's going to be the step change that we needed for VR for mass adoption. So, yeah, thank you for listening. Yeah, any questions? I don't dare ask. Let's go with.
So you probably get this question all the time, but so what's the ETA on the consumer version of that?
Tricky. It's probably having to wait for the Google data to take off now, or certainly for the autumn. If you go to the website, where I'd like you to, which is just wizdish.com, and register, we're looking towards doing a Kickstarter. Kickstarter is not always an ideal medium for this sort of thing, but we feel that might be, it's worth a try. We found to our cost there are issues to do with crowdfunding, which to do with sort of cyberbullying and things like that. It's not as straightforward as you might imagine. But that would be one way to test the waters, and that you saw the design that we'd like to take if you do that.
And what would the price point be?
That also is difficult. At the moment, this was being sold for 400 for the shoes, base, and platform. We want to better that, certainly, because we realise that unless we can get the price right down, it's not going to become the sort of thing that to get anywhere near the mass market, it's going to get under £200 very likely.
Is it the audio control? Do you have any interference from ambient sounds?
So I tried putting speakers right next to it, really loud. One person did find it. They tried in a nightclub and found some interference, so they told them to put it on a rubber mat, and that fixed it. So no, it seems to be quite impervious to that.
Is the direction decided by the audio as well, or is
No.
it by the direction you're working?
We take the direction from the direction of this, and there's a couple of reasons for that. I used to have a slide about it. Your feet don't necessarily tell you which way you wanted to walk, and your feet won't know which way your head's pointing, so you have to sync those two together. But my feeling is you've got to solve the question in the right place, and to my mind, being able to say compare your head direction and your shoulder direction is going to give you a much more reliable indicator. So, because anything you do with your feet could be misinterpreted between turning slightly to the left and moving left foot. And it would add an extra step, which is too much. You can't be waiting a step at any time, because your mind will really spot that. It's better, we found, I'm glad you asked this in a way, because what we've always found is less is more when it comes to this sort of thing. If you make it really, really simple, really reliable, that's the best you can do. Any attempt so far to embellish on that just backfires and makes it worse.
I found when using, I haven't used, let's say, this device or another one similar to it, that again, because you can only kind of slide this way, you can't really step or strafe very easily because your feet are kind of shuffling around. It's a bit of an odd move.
It's true. Some people have looked at moving your leg like that to try and indicate the fact that you're stressing. The problem then is that your head stayed here and your vision's gone there, and that's the best way to cause nausea. So it's kind of almost better to live with it. We found most people prefer to live within the limitation of the device and have it properly work, rather than a half-assed attempt to get there without more complicated.
If you're walking or running, do you still have your hands free, or is it, do people tend to hold on to the sides?
To begin with, to hold on to the sides, and occasionally you might touch it, just to keep your balance. But because it's, a linear surface, it's the same in every direction, you pretty soon learn how to stand up, and it's nothing like learning how to skate.
But otherwise it would be difficult to, for example, play games like Fallout 4 where you still
Yeah.
able to control.
Yeah. Now, that I believe you can, well, I mean, they have a video example at the top, at the start of this, just to show that somebody using a gun and able to walk. People like to put in idealised views of playing their devices when they advertise them online. We'd be very honest and just show lots and lots of people holding on, because that's what we tell them to do when they first ever try the device. But at least they are trying it and buying it. More?
Just one more. In terms of that device, what do you think has been the most successful game or activity that people have used it for? That often when you make a new type of platform like this,
The problem with so far is that there's not been any kind of perceived solution to locomotion, apart from this blink method, which, as I said, causes more problems than it cures in some ways. So not many people have put that. That's why we asked Tom to do the Pac-Man, because actually, although that's throwing you into a sort of scary situation, which is not what you should do when you first start on VR, it leaves people with an impression. They come back realising what it does for them. That if you try to play the Pac-Man, FPS, as we should call it, without that, it was actually pretty rubbish. The developer was quite despondent when he first tried it, until he tried it on there and then he realised why he wanted it. So yes, something that allows locomotion, because I think that's the way we perceive 3D in the world is we'll not just the eyeballs. It's a memory function more than anything else. If you see an object there, you walk around it, and you know how long it took you to walk around, and you'll see it from different perspectives. So walking is very good with Sistine Chapel, for instance, and something like that. Your appreciation of it, a lot of that came from locomotion, being able to view it where you wanted, when you wanted, without suddenly jumping around.
We better end it there anyway.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so just before we start, as you can see, I've got something different that I'm trying today. So if you are interested in sending any questions in anonymously about what we're doing, feel free to use the link provided here. So it's q.gl/slides/5A9NY8. And what that will show you is a little kind of message screen where you can type in a message. Send it, I will then see that as I'm doing my presentation, so if you have any questions I can try and answer them as we go through. So, like I said, that's a new thing, so apologies if it doesn't work or if it is something I forget, but we should talk about that hopefully a bit later on. So, let me get the actual presentation up and let's talk through what this is all about. So, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Ryan Flynn. I'm a lecturer here in the Department of Creative Professions and Digital Arts. I used to be in computing, so I used to work with Damon and Yanis and Darren and loads of other people. And so I know some of you are my students, either ex or you're coming through this year. So what I'm going to show today is something that I've been looking into for about a week now. It's nothing groundbreaking, so don't sort of get your hopes up that you're going to see something here that's going to blow your mind. But to my knowledge, it is the way that I'm using this is very new, and obviously feel free to correct me as we go through if you know that actually what I'm presenting is not new. But anyway, let's carry on. So what I'm doing today is showing you how to connect Unity using something called OSC with a couple of other programs that you may know or you may have heard of. For those of you who haven't heard of them, you'll see them, so you'll be able to use them. And if you're at all interested in coding, what I'm going to show you is really, really good. It's also really good if any of you are interested in creative uses for Unity. So what I'm going to show you is not a game. It's not anywhere near being a game, but it is a creative use for Unity, so it's quite an interesting area. So let's start off with probably the bit that most people are scratching their heads about, which is OSC. OSC stands for Open Sound Control, and it's kind of like, for those of you who know MIDI, it's kind of a similar thing. The idea is it's a way of sending signals between different programs. That's really all that it's there to do. So some of you may use something like JSON in some of your programs where you're passing information from one thing to another. And JSON and that type of XML structured type of text that you send between programs is very useful. But one of the disadvantages of it is that it can be relatively slow. OSC is designed to be as instantaneous as possible, like MIDI, because for the vast majority of the time, it's being used to drive sound. So obviously things have to happen really quickly. So if you're incredibly interested in the technical aspects, OSC normally works on a UDP protocol, so it's not in any way packet checked. It just spans out stuff and hopes that someone receives it at the other end. There's very little error correction going in there, so if you're doing anything complex, you may find that you have to do your own error checking. You can't rely on built-in error checking like you would do if you're using TCP. And I've just realised I'm probably talking way too geeky for a lot of people, so that's as far as I'll go for that. But if any of you have got really geeky questions about this, please feel free to either ask me using the link at the top of the presentation or afterwards. The OSC package that I'm using is something called OSC Simple, which has been developed by a Danish arts corporation and a couple of programmers. It's available in the Unity store for, I think it's about €10. You could roll your own version if you wanted to. It's relatively simple to do. It's just I thought that it would be a lot easier to buy something that I knew worked well, rather than spending hours trying to figure out why an OSC message wasn't being sent or received properly. And out of all of them, this is the one that I found that does do what it says on the tin. There are about 3 or 4 OSC implementations in the asset store, and the vast majority of them work until you try and do something a little bit complex, and then they don't work, whereas this one just does everything you expect. So, let's move on from there and go to the next part of the puzzle, which is Sonic Pi. So, some of you may have heard of this, for those of you who haven't. Sonic Pi was developed by a guy called Sam Aaron in, I believe, Cambridge University. But what's nice about this is that it's a way of teaching programming to kids that, like Unity, has an instantaneous response. But unlike Unity, it's not there to do everything. It purely makes music. And what you can do with Sonic Pi is actually really nice. What I want to do, you'll notice there's a link to take you to the website. You can download it. It works on pretty much everything. It's one of the built-in programs that comes with the Raspberry Pi, so you can take it around with you very easily. You can also download for Mac and Windows and Linux. But Sonic Pi is really nice for a couple of different reasons. Firstly, it's really easy to understand what it's doing. So to give you an example, I'll just drag over the Sonic Pi window. Okay. And let's say I want to make this play a musical note. What I can do is just type in a very simple command, and I'm just going to check that my sound output is via HDMI, because otherwise this won't work.
Oh, hang on.
Okay, I'll do it. Is this going out?
HDMI sound is back for some reason.
Okay, so this goes out into the speaker.
Should do.
Okay. Maybe not.
Is the thing unmuted? Did you turn it on and off again?
Did you turn the what on and off again?
I'm being facetious.
I don't actually know.
No, the room controls, is that muted or unmuted?
So I've only worked here for 10 years. You might have, actually more than that, here 15 now. You might have thought I could. Anyway, let's not worry about that. So, yes, what will happen now is when I play this, I get a nice note. Now, obviously, you can do some more complicated stuff. So, for example, something like this. It takes a little while to kick in. So, what you can see is you can get some nice ambient stuff, and the coding itself is not that difficult to understand. If you're used to any coding whatsoever, you'll look at that and you'll go, yep, kind of get that. It's technically an offshoot of Ruby, for those of you who are interested in the really in-depth stuff. And underneath it all, this runs on something called Super Collider, which is a very complicated audio synthesis engine. Super Collider, you probably could spend in the region of 15 years learning just how to make a sound. It's that complicated, but it's a really powerful piece of kit. And you can do other stuff with this as well. So, for example, you can do. So this is slightly different style, the same type of thing. Alternatively, you can just nick what they've done here and paste that over. What you notice is the idea with this is that it's meant to be a live coding environment, so you can actually make music as a performance piece rather than having it done ahead of time. I've used Sonic Pi in teaching for a couple of years now, and what really gets students excited about it is the fact that they can do quite complicated things very easily. They can make noise very easily, which they like. Sorry, I've just had 2 questions pop up, which is why I'm pausing. To answer one of the questions, I tried sending you a question about UDP, but I don't know if you got it. I think that's a joke. I hope it's a joke because I'm going to answer it as a joke. And one for Darren, I'll tell you afterwards. So that's Sonic Pi. Yes?
Just so I understand properly, so rather than those being loops of traditional music, they're made procedurally through the code, is that right? Or
Yes, exactly.
So what in that example you showed, was there any actual audio that was inputted, or was it completely inputted?
Yeah, this particular one uses a NEM loop, which is the drum loop in the background, that's a sample. So
can you show an example of any one of these, of what were the raw sounds that were input, and then what is the end result happening?
Okay, so in this particular example, if I was to get rid of this and type in, say, to use a different loop, let's try breakbeat loop. What I'll do is if I oh no, because it's using the sample there as well. So if you're talking about just generative sound, this is an example of just generative sound. So essentially what's happening here is Sonic Pi is being asked the array 1, 3, 6, 4. You take each of those in turn, and then you choose from a range of -3 to 3, and then you play a chord which is from the first array with the invert function of the chord being arranged between -3 and 3. So essentially, what that's doing is that's saying play a random note between 1, 3, 6 and 4. So you choose any one of those random notes, and then you choose a specific invert function on there. So basically it's either going to play it normally or the inverse of it. And then sleep is where you say pause, so you get a kind of a pattern emerging, like a beats per minute, for example. So in this case, when we play this, it will just be very simple. But the advantage with this is that it's random. So in theory, every time this plays, it should play a different set of notes. In practice, it won't do because the random seed is generated via the same process each time. So we'd have to choose a different random seed if we wanted it to be completely random.
So what other functions, more complicated functions, that perhaps you can implement sounds in different ways programmatically?
Well, okay. You can use any number of different synths. So if I was to change, wouldn't work in this particular example because that's just playing notes. But I could use a synthesizer with this instead of just the inbuilt notes, the inbuilt keyboard. You can play any number of these. So you've got normal sine waves, tangent waves, all the different kind of generative noise waveforms that you can get. You don't have a load of effects that you can put over the top of it, so delay, echo, reverb, all the kind of standard stuff you would expect. But then you also have samples that you can throw into the mix. So you have a number of different bass sounds, drum sounds, electronic sounds, and all sorts of stuff that you can then layer over the top of that. And what you can do is build that up using the language, which I haven't really got time to go into everything because it's a very, very, in-depth piece of software, even though it appears to be quite basic, I suppose. But if I was to say take this and paste this in, what you can see here is you've got a number of different loops that are happening all at the same time. So you've got a LPF effect, which is a low-pass frequency modulator. We've got a reverb effect, pressure effect, and a distortion effect, all on top of a loop. So this will now generatively crunch effects over a basic loop. So it's kind of really distorted. But then if I was to say, okay, let's change the cut-off, Now, what's nice about this, if you can stand listening to this for this long, is that you can change these as it's playing. So, for example, if I started playing, doing a set number of loops before it gets into the next one. It's not actually changing in time. Let's see if there's another one here. We can do. What I would suggest is that you basically download it and have a look at it yourself, because it is really, really easy to get your head around if you're at all into coding. I mean, this is probably one of the simplest ones.
How do you actually implement it into Unity?
That's what I'm going to talk about. That's what I'm going to talk about in a second. How we implement that into Unity will become clear as we go through. The other part of the puzzle is this thing, which is an app for, I believe, for pretty much everything. But I'll just show you it on the visualizer. Okay. So TouchOSC gives you a number of different setups. You can actually program this yourself on a computer and then send it over to the device. But it gives you a number of touch controls. So, for example, I have here sliders that can be obviously steered up and down. We've got toggles that can be toggled on and off, and we've also got hit pads. So these are the toggle ones, and a volume style, pan style control. All of this is sending messages via the network back to the computer. So as I change that, sorry, this purple one here, there'll be a message in the computer, or going back to the computer, saying, you know, control number 4 is being changed, and the value of it at this point in time is. What I can then do is pick that up and then use that inside Unity. So you're probably wondering how. And this is where I start to get everything together. So the key point of what I'm doing is taking the controls from TouchOSC, feeding them into Unity, and then changing things inside Unity based on the values that are coming from the TouchOSC controller. So there are a number of advantages to this. Obviously, it's fast. There are also some disadvantages. As I said, you may have some issues with network latency or packets not getting there properly, that type of thing. But for the majority of the time, what it does is good enough for what you need it to do to make things work. So, what we're going to start off with is a small demo that I've made called the Cinema, which you can probably guess what it's going to do. If I can find my mouse pointer. So, what I've got here is a really simple setup, just a couple of items in the scene. You can see I've got a first-person view, the prototyping stage, and a panel with a movie texture applied to it. Now, what I've also got here is two lights. I've got one directional light and one spotlight, and both of those lights have been wired up to OSC, and you can see that over here in the OSC controller. So what you'll see first of all is that in that script, it asks you for a port number, and that port number has to be the same as the port number in your OSC controller, and I'll show you how to set that up on OSC Touch in a second. You'll also see an IP address, so that's the IP address of the computer, That is something that you then have to put into the OSC controller to tell it where to send the messages to. Open and await should be ticked so that it runs as soon as the program starts. And then you can see that you can do some mappings. And what I've got here are mappings that are based on the OSC values that are sent through from Touch OSC. So for example, /3 fader 3 corresponds to the third page of the OSC touch controller, because the first 2 pages are keyboards. So that's first page, second page. So that's the third page. And then fader 3 is this fader here, because it's the third fader along. What you can see there is as I move that, it's sending the value of the fader through to the controller that corresponds to the directional light intensity. So I can ramp the intensity up or down. I've also got another controller down here for fader 4 that maps onto the light intensity of the spotlight, which is the other light in the scene. So if I zoom out and press play,
above my head, they placed a fruitless crown and put a barren sceptre in my grip.
you may not be able to see that, but I can make the lights come on.
I'm succeeding. If it be so.
So that's just sending messages through. And that's probably the easiest way of showing it, is just to basically show you something happening in the scene. I didn't have to do any coding with that, because that's all taken care of by this OSC controller, which is nice, because it means you don't have to spend hours trying to figure out why something isn't working. However, that will only get you so far, because all that's doing is targeting built-in Unity objects, whatever they may be, and then changing the values of those based on the values that you're inputting from here. There are difficulties with this approach. For example, the spotlight's intensity is not 0 to 1 in Unity. It goes beyond that. The slider on here, however, is only set up to be 0 to 1. So what you'll find is that sometimes the lights don't really change that much. So what you then need to do is to program the Touch OSC controller so the sliders go from that 0 to 100, for example. And you can do that by downloading an OSC controller mapping software on your PC or Mac that then sends it through to there and it controls it. That's something I didn't show you before, actually, sorry. Go back into here. If I go into the settings, you'll notice that first of all, this is where I set up the IP address of the host and the port numbers that it uses to communicate. And then you'll also see that I've got a number of different layouts that I can use. So it changes how they're arranged, whether or not they look like keyboards or sliders or buttons or whatever that might be. You can also add your own ones and create your own ones using a piece of software on your Mac or PC and then send it over to this. I haven't done that with this purely because, like I said, I've only been working on it for probably, this is the sum of about 2 days of actual work, and I'd say about 2 days worth of research. So it's not anywhere near like finished. So that's the first part, which is the cinema style exhibition piece. I believe I've lost my presentation. Here. So, you notice that the previous example didn't have anything to do with Sonic Pi. All I was doing was taking OSC commands from my tablet, or my phone in this case, and changing something in Unity. So what we need to think about is, well, what exactly are we going to do in Sonic Pi? Because the way that it works is not quite as simple as what I've just shown you, because you do need to get into scripting. Now I've already given you a kind of a rough demo of what Sonic Pi is. But to show you what it is capable of doing, I'm just going to show you something online. You can see that this is being live coded, so you'll see bits going in and out as he's doing it. happening at certain times. But you'll also notice as he scrolls up and down, he's got like a huge two-dimensional array that stores all of the notes of the that part of the song there, phases, just there. And the way that he's done this is really, really cool. He's not just guessed this, what he's done is he's used the sound analysis software to actually analyse the original song and find out what notes were being played at each point. So you can then put that in, and there's a full tutorial. If you do a search for Sonic Pi aerodynamic on Google, you'll find a full tutorial on how he's gone through this. It's really fascinating how he managed to go from literally nothing to a full version of aerodynamic, and the only thing that's sampled in there is the kind of the guitar loop, the down, so that's a sample from a Sister Sledge song, I believe. But he explains that as well, about how he cuts up that sample so that it only plays back the bits that he wants. So yeah, it's a really cool piece of kit when you know what you're doing with it. Like I said, I've not been using it to this level for very long, and I'm not in the live coding environment at all yet with it. I need time to get my head around it. But Sonic Pi can do that, but what we're more interested in is how you then take that information and make it visible to Unity. So what I've done is implemented both of those together, and I've said, okay, I want to use a specific OSC message which will then send a piece of code to Sonic Pi. So we have Sonic Pi running in the background, and what happens then is that Unity will trigger an OSC message which will then send some code to Sonic Pi, which will then run the code and then produce the noise. So in this case, the key thing is the OSC messages have to be sent on port 4557. If you do a Google search, that is literally the only piece of information that Sonic Pi have provided as to how to make OSC work. They don't support it, they think it's not ready for prime time, they don't want people using it, but someone contacted Sam Aaron and said, can we use OSC with it? And he said, literally when you look it up, he said 2 words, port 4577 and run /code. That's the only thing he said about it. And people have then figured out how to make it work. So what I've done from that is inside Unity, I've done a couple of different things. So first of all, in this scene, all I've got are 3 cubes, as you can see. But each cube has a basically you can click on it. I'm trying to think of the right word. Ray. Fires out ray. Fantastic, thank you. I was thinking ray tracing. I'm like, what? No, that's not right. Yeah, ray casting. So what we can do then is detect obviously which cube's been clicked on, but then it can take a little while to kick in. Yes. So you notice that what I've now got is that atmospheric sound that we were talking about earlier. And I can then overlay things on there by clicking. Now this should come in a second. Now there is one slight problem, which is when you stop, as you can hear, you need to go over to Sonic Pi and stop it manually. At the moment, there is a way of doing it, but it involves hooking into the editor preferences within Unity. So, you know, when you go for a plugin, they have their own menu item, that type of thing. And I haven't got quite in-depth into it just yet to make it stop when you stop playback or quit the game. But what I'm doing there is sending the code over to Sonic Pi via the stuff built into Unity. So I believe it's this. Yeah. So what you notice here is that we've got some code, and these are the messages that are being sent over. So you can see message command 1 is the first cube, 2 is the second cube, 2 is the third cube. And you can see that what I've got here is simply all of the stuff that's typed into Sonic Pi just on one line. So it's just all on one line. So what you do is you obviously play about with stuff in Sonic Pi first, you get it sounding how you want it to, and then you copy and paste that and put it in on one line. However, those of you who are one step ahead of me will all straight away realise that, well, because this is just a string, surely I could just dump anything into that I want at runtime. Well, yes, you can. So if you wanted to, you could change, say, the way that an effects panel worked by what the player is doing inside Unity. So as they move around the scene, certain things become louder or softer. Obviously, I know you can do that with Unity's built-in audio mixer, but we're talking about generative music that happens as the user is playing the game, generative sound effects. So you can do pretty much anything there by sending what you want Sonic Pi to do via OSC. Sonic Pi picks it up, plays it in the background. And this doesn't interfere, by the way, with Unity's built-in sound engine, which is a good thing, because what it means that you can do, and I'll just get rid of this and open up my third example, is you can use it on top of anything else that you're playing in the scene. So, this is where I need my touch controller, hopefully.
Upon my head, they placed a fruitless crown, and put a barren sceptre in my grip, thence to be wrenched with an unreal hand. Thou son of mine succeeding, if it be so. A Banco's issue have I filed my mind. For them, the gracious Duncan have I murdered, but rackers in the vessel of my peace, only for them, to make them kings. The seed of Banco, kings. Yes, large dearest child. Till thou told the deed. Scorpions in my mind.
Sorry, I just like that for the Scorpions is my mind bit. Just, I don't know if any of you have seen Macbeth with the fass in there, but it's very good. Okay, so I'm trying to stop. No, that's not it. So what I've done there is obviously with the touch controller, I had certain aspects that I'd fired off. Obviously the fireworks were meant to happen at the end, which you can probably tell. But the idea there is I'm just showing you that you can actually use this system to do anything you want over the top of what's happening inside your Unity project. And bear in mind here that a lot of the stuff that I'm showing is not really going to be suitable for a game, although you could possibly wrangle it that way. I'm more interested at the moment in using Unity for kind of performance art and really weird and wonderful stuff like that. And to me, the idea of being able to trigger things happening in Unity from external controllers, because obviously bear in mind, it doesn't have to be this. You could have anything that's capable of sending an OSC signal. So it could be an old MIDI keyboard, it could be a Connect, it could be a tripwire. You know, you could have lots of different things that would send these signals. But the key point is that once you've got it all hooked together, that can then trigger off anything inside Unity and alter it in real time, which to me is really exciting, because that's something that, yeah, we do in gaming tend to look at, you know, the idea of randomness and the idea of what happens if you set something going in a simulation that obviously over time tends to have different things happening and communicate with different objects in different ways. But this is something a little bit more tangible, a little bit more hands-on. We can directly control what's going on, and we can see the results, and we can also make individual and very complex experiences for people using this stuff. So that's, I think, pretty much everything I wanted to go through. I will just check to see if I've written anything on my slides. I've just written, thank you. So yeah, thank you very much. Any questions?
They're anonymously posted.
Sorry?
They're anonymously posted.
They're anonymously posted. Well, because it crashed halfway through or disappeared, I don't actually know where they've gone. Let me just see if doing this will bring it up. Right, so, the true spirit of the lecturer, I'm going to be completely open about all of this extremely stupid stuff. So, trust any question about UDP, but I don't know if you got it. +1 for that. What format of the loops for Sonic Pi? I believe all of the included ones are in WAV, although I have played around with MP3 and that works as well. Pretty much anything the Super Collider can use, which I know doesn't help that much. But I'm guessing, obviously WAV and MP3 are a given, but I'm guessing AAC would be usable as well, possibly other uncompressed formats, but I'd need to look into that. But yeah, WAV and MP3, we should really go for all of that. What software was used for sound analysis? That's a interesting question, because I can't remember the name of it. However, if you do a Sonic Pi aerodynamic tutorial, and it's this one. Just to make it a bit more fun, you can do it in French, if you really want to. Sonic Visualizer. Sonic Visualizer, open source program by Queen Mary, University of London, Queen Mary. And essentially this enables you to, does anyone use Photoshop? Histograms in Photoshop? Basically for sound, same type of thing. So you can analyse sound and not only find out where things are in a waveform, but how much of the waveform is concentrated in one area. So if you analyse it, you can then say, oh, okay, this is roughly around this frequency band, which must mean that it's a A minor chord or whatever it might be, or an A minor note. You can analyse the sound directly and pull that information out. And as I said, this website here does a kind of mini tutorial on how that works. So you can see that he analyses the tempo out of Audacity simply by counting the beats at the beginning, then getting some idea from the time, and then starting to look at the sound frequency and analysing to then pick out the different notes from there and how the frequencies work across the whole spectrum, which is kind of cool. Okay. Any other questions at all, anonymous or otherwise? Yes?
Why a Mac?
Oh, I didn't answer that, did I?
And it was a serious question, it wasn't me being facetious again.
Okay.
Does it work better with a Mac or?
No.
Okay.
It can work with Windows fine. There was, years ago, this very kind of spurious idea that Macs were better for music production because their sound cards were slightly better with latency issues than on Windows. Something to do, for those of you who remember with IRQ allocations, if you remember startup.bat and all of that type of stuff, having to change IRQ allocations and that type of thing. For those of you who don't remember that, or who have never done that, may God rest your souls, because that was a really interesting time in computing. You know, you start up your machine one day and it all of a sudden decides your sound card's not going to work because it's allocated a different output to it from the last time it was turned on, and you didn't know that, and you had to then dial it for that. So yes, that was why historically you would use a Mac for this type of thing. Nowadays, really doesn't matter. They both work equally well with OSC. I won't get into the whole Mac versus PC thing here because
you're wrong.
We've had that discussion. Any other questions at all? Did anyone think they would find this useful or interesting? A couple of nods. Good. Okay, that's good. So, if you do, and if you are interested in working on anything like this, I am going to be using this with my students this year. Not in games, although that's my main teaching area. I do a course called Creative Coding, where we're going to be using this type of stuff. So it'd be really interesting if anyone does have any input or any ideas or anything like that to share. My name is, as I said before, Ryan Flynn, but if you don't know my email address, etc., you can just do a search for Ryan Flynn Greenwich, and you'll see possibly the worst mugshot you've ever seen in your life. I hate that picture. So there's my email address, r.d.flynn, so feel free to get in contact with me if you want to discuss further